Chapter 739. When his knees touched the ground, Enihu's face was twisted. He gritted his teeth and spoke in a low voice. When the words came out of his throat, he looked like a trapped beast. Biao saw this and gripped his mahogany sword tightly. His beloved son, whom he had spent so much effort to raise, was forced to kneel by a few brats. He could not take this lying down no matter what. Go and get ready. Once we enter the tomb, think of a way to get rid of these people. Biao ordered the people around him in a cold voice. His face was full of murderous intent. At this time, Enihu had already stood up. His face was full of dissatisfaction as he glared at Hellion Vivian and the rest. The disciples were upset and wanted to pull him. Young master! Slap. Enihu flung away the hand that was reaching him and pointed at Hellion Vivian. Don't think that you're invincible just because you're fast. We've just arrived at the entrance of the tomb. It's not certain who will win or lose. Once we enter the tomb, you'll be begging for mercy. Hellion Weiwei smiled and said slowly, before we set off, young master and I seem to have said the same thing. However, in the end, the one who begged for mercy was not us but you. You. This was what Enihu hated the most. Biao blocked him and looked at Hellion Vivian with a gloomy gaze. Little brother, don't be so full of yourself. We haven't entered the tomb yet. Who can predict what will happen in the future? Who knows what will happen in the end? As your senior, I'll give you a word of advice. Don't be too arrogant. Old master and I, you should say this to your son. Hellion Vivian looked up lazily and met Biao's gaze. She did not back down. Don't be too arrogant. Biao laughed and squinted his eyes. His voice was cold. It seems that the news of you being the first to arrive at the entrance of the tomb has boosted your confidence. I don't know if you know, little brother, although you all arrived early, there are some people who left later than you. For example, my eldest daughter. She left in the last group. If you really want to count carefully, the winner might not necessarily be you all. After Biao finished his sentence, his expression showed a hint of pride. Almost all the participating exorcists knew that his daughter, who was the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, had set off alone 2 hours after everyone else had set off. She had been giving way to the members of the other families. Just this point alone was enough to cast doubt on the other party's victory. He wanted to see if people would agree that the Zhuge family had won the first round after he announced this news. Even if they agreed, it wouldn't be perfect. Do you want the Inai family to retreat after being humiliated? There was no such thing in this world. Needless to say, Biao was indeed a meticulous schemer. After he finished speaking, the crowd started to discuss among themselves. Although the voices were soft, the effect that Biao wanted had been achieved. He looked at Hellion Vivian and the others, and the smile returned to his face. Hellion Weiwei looked at him. Her eyes were black and transparent, without a trace of impurity. She said calmly, "This is a competition. We have won according to the rules of the competition. However, old master and I, what are you using to pressure us with these kinds of words? According to Master Ni's calculation, does it mean that your Inai family sent out more than 30 disciples to fight against the 3 of us? Even if you were the first to arrive, it would still be considered a loss? After all, you have 10 times more people than us. Before the start of this competition, everyone thought that we were bound to lose. Now that we are the first to arrive at the entrance of the tomb, old master and I is trying to find some groundless reason to deny our victory. I would like to ask, is the winner decided by the rules of the competition, or old master and I himself? As the leader of the 12 shadows of the Tang sect, other than the arms business, she also majored in law and lawyer. Although it was not usually used, the Tang sect had specialized people in this area. Furthermore, there was the sly young Master Tang, who could settle a case with a few words. There was no need for her to show up. However, it did not mean that she did not know how to use it. If Biao wanted to attack them verbally, he would have to ask for her permission first. Following Hellion Vivian's words, Biao's face froze again. This was because Hellion Vivian's words were like a stone thrown into the water. Although it was not strong, it was enough to cause ripples, because it hit the center of the water. The gazes of the surrounding people had changed, and whispers could be heard from the crowd. The number of people from the Inai family should be the sum of all our teams. It's easy to win. That's right. The Zhuge family only sent 3 people to participate in the competition. The rest of the children are too young to participate. It's already not easy to win under such circumstances. Why is Master and I still so insistent? To put it bluntly, he's just unwilling to admit defeat. The Ni family has never lost before, so it's inevitable that he would feel unjust. If that's the case, then the Ni family is too much. Look at Ni whose unwillingness to apologize just now. This is not the demeanor of the exorcising tribe. Not necessarily, maybe it's a misunderstanding. I don't think that's what Master and I meant. Let's wait and see. Ni Biao hated this feeling. Initially, he said those words to teach the other party a lesson. But he did not expect that he would end up shooting himself in the foot. He had underestimated this poor boy. He was not very capable, but he had a sharp tongue. Now that everything he said was wrong, did he really have to apologize to a junior in front of everyone? How was he going to convince the others in the future? Ni Biao clenched his fists so tightly that his fingers turned red. For the first time in his life, he tasted the feeling of being choked. No wonder Ni, who was defeated by this poor boy twice in a row. This person's mind was more vicious than he thought. He also had some tricks up his sleeve, and knew how to use the people around him to suppress him. He should have gotten rid of such a person long ago. This was not the first time Ni Biao regretted his actions, but this time, compared to the murderous intent, the resentment in his eyes gradually surged. Helian Weiwei, who was standing in front of him, frowned. But before she could see clearly, Ni Feng, who was wearing a fur cloak and a long dress, stood in front of Ni Biao. Her voice was as gentle as flowing water, and it was soothing to the ears. Young Master, as a father, they always like to praise their children. My father is the same. What he said to you just now, he didn't mean anything else. He just said that I set off late, so I hope you can understand the feelings of a parent, and not think too much of him. Of course, the competition should follow the rules. No matter who set off first, the first one to reach the entrance of the tomb will be considered the winner. However, it's getting late, and there are still 2 more rounds of competition. As for the final result, we can't make a conclusion yet. It's more important to enter the tomb as soon as possible. Chapter 740. On the surface, Ni Feng's words sounded very understanding. After all, her tone was too gentle. After hearing it, people would only think that she was sensible, kind-hearted and upright. In fact, her words not only helped Ni Biao out of his predicament, but also glossed over the fact that Helian Vivian and the rest had won. She also hinted that this was not the final result of the competition. Helian Vivian had never seen Ni Feng in this life, but she was familiar with her in her previous life. She had the same attitude, leaving the bad guys to others and fanning the flames behind. Compared to Ni who, this kind of person was the one she least wanted to see. The reincarnation of the Phoenix girl? Helian Vivian chuckled. Even if it was fake, it was too unqualified. However, people were always ignorant, and they trusted their eyes more than their hearts. Therefore, when Ni Feng spoke, there was naturally a round of agreement. Miss Ni is right. Entering the tomb is more important. The most important thing for us is to get the Saraira. Reaching the entrance of the tomb is only the first step. No one knows what dangers we will encounter after entering the tomb. Therefore, we should go in as soon as possible before it gets too dark, and try to get out of the tomb before the rooster crows. When Ni Feng heard that someone supported her, she immediately looked at that person and smiled gently. She had won a lot of favor from the exorcists. Helian Vivian curved her thin lips. Her tone was light, but she hit the nail on the head. Miss Ni, the people who complicate this matter are Master Ni and young Master Ni. You're always putting the blame on them, and I'm troubled by it too. Hearing this, Ni Feng's fingers paused. She clenched her fists and loosened them quickly. She coughed and said, "This was originally a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, my younger brother was too serious, which led to this situation. I'll apologize to you on behalf of my younger brother. Young Master, are you willing to accept?" Of course, Ni Feng did not mean to apologize. Listening to her carefully, one could tell that she was being aggressive and serious. Using her family's influence to oppress others was a misunderstanding. No matter how one listened to it, it did not sound like she felt that the Inai family was at fault. However, since Inai Feng had said so, Hellion Vivian would be considered petty if she did not respond. From the beginning until now, Inai Feng thought that she had figured out the character of the person in front of her. That was why she deliberately said such words to let Hellion Vivian refute. If that was the case, the one who would be looked down upon would not be the Inai family, but the person standing opposite her. However, what Inai Feng did not expect was that Hellion Vivian actually looked at her and smiled. That look was as if she could see through all her thoughts. She said indifferently, "Okay, you can apologize." Inai Feng paused for a moment. Then, she clenched her fists and narrowed her eyes. She never thought that the other party would agree so readily. Moreover, she didn't really want to apologize. She was prepared for what she would say next if the other party refuted her. She would make everyone hate the other party. But now, the situation was the complete opposite. It felt like she had placed the bait, but the other party didn't even look at her, let alone take the bait. Although an apology was just a formality to her. However, such a feeling of inferiority still made her feel very uncomfortable. However, Inai Feng was such a person. Even if she resisted, she would not show it on her face. Instead, like before, she coughed and said gently, "I'm sorry." Zhuge Yin was dumbfounded when he saw this scene going back and forth in the tomb. He had never seen anyone who could make the Inai family apologize in front of so many people. Hellion Vivian was one of them. She could force the Inai family to this extent by herself. Whether it was Zhuge Yin or the other exorcists, when they looked at Hellion Vivian again, their eyes were filled with shallow but obvious admiration. Young Master Zhao's team did not come up. If they were here, they would definitely hug Hellion Vivian's leg and call her boss. That group of people had witnessed part of Hellion Vivian's strength. Until now, other than Zhuge Yin, none of the exorcists present knew about Hellion Vivian's wisdom in retreating from the vampire bats. Of course, when they heard about it in the future, they were still shocked for a long time. The Inai family's father and son, who were unaware of all this, were still imagining that Hellion Vivian would kneel down and beg them for their lives after entering the tomb. Therefore, no one wanted to enter the tomb more than them. No matter how good they were at talking, they were still inexperienced in exorcism. When they entered the tomb, they would be in familiar territory. These three people would have to think twice before acting arrogantly. Inai who calmed down as he thought about it. He tried not to think about kneeling down and apologizing, although the image kept replaying in his mind, and he felt like he was being slapped in public. He had to hold it in now. Only by holding it in could they return the favor. "Time's up," someone among the exorcists said. "It's already past noon. Even if someone comes up, they will only be considered as a team that has been eliminated. We don't have to wait anymore, we can enter the tomb now." This sentence made the exorcists who were originally seated tense up again. After all, the inside of the tomb was different from the outside. Once they entered, it meant that they would have to face unknown dangers. Even if they were exorcists, they would still feel afraid. It was because this tomb was too old, and there were many things that they did not understand. For this reason, the exorcist tribe specially found an old man who lived in Mount Taibai to lead the way. The old man was a local. He lived and ate in the mountains, so he was very familiar with this place. However, the tomb was a place that he would rather die than enter. If it was not for the expensive invitation, this trip into the tomb would not be easy. The old man was once an official in the previous dynasty. The so-called official was often said to be a tomb raider, who raided tombs for the imperial court. The exorcists knew how to exorcise evil spirits and suppress demons, but they were not proficient in this. They had to find someone like the old man to enter the tomb with them. Of course, if they could be like the Inai family and have more than 2 official in their own team, the chances of winning would be greatly increased. At the same time, it would also reduce the danger in the tomb. However, these tomb raiders were not omnipotent, especially those who worked for the imperial court. They were more disciplined than those who fought privately. For example, they would not touch the tombs during the golden chime, or they would light a candle at the southeast corner of the coffin, before the tomb was opened. If the light was extinguished, they would have to leave immediately. It was said that this was an agreement between the living outside the tomb and the dead inside the tomb. And Biao did not care about these. He just wanted to get the Saraira at all costs. At the same time, he would let the arrogant brat have a taste of what it meant to regret. Once they entered the graveyard, they would know who was in charge here. Chapter 741. However, there was one thing that Biao found strange. Why had Elder Su and the rest not arrived at the entrance of the tomb yet? Logically speaking, it was impossible. Even if they lost track of Zhuge Yun and the rest midway, with their abilities, they should have arrived before the time limit. Could it be that they had encountered some mishap? Biao looked behind him, his eyes darkening. A disciple leaned over and whispered a few words in his ear. Biao's eyes immediately narrowed. You didn't find them? Things were getting weirder. Where did Elder Su and the rest go? The disciple looked at Biao's face and guessed. Could it be that Elder Su and the rest were taken away by the demon under the Zonghai waterfall? Biao paused, then said, Impossible. Since the three brats could cross the Zonghai waterfall and reach the entrance of the tomb, it meant that the demon under the waterfall was not awakened, and Elder Su and the rest should be able to cross the waterfall as well. Forget it, it's not a big deal. Let's go in first. You guys wait outside the tomb and wait for Elder Su and the rest. Ask them to wait here. There's no need to go back. When the time came for him to obtain the Saraira, once something went wrong, he could also ask Old Su and the others to immediately solve the problem that could arise at any time. As proud as Biao was, he never thought that there was another possibility, which was that Elder Su, who he sent out, had been silently eliminated by someone else. He also did not know that the one who had the final say in the tomb was not him, but someone else who was the Devil King. That someone was now standing beside Hellion Vivian, quietly studying the stone wall at the entrance of the tomb with his deep eyes. His indifferent side profile had a strong scholarly aura. On the surface, he was definitely elegant and noble, but in fact when he lowered his head, there was a faint smile on his face, revealing the devil's unique black-bellied aura. Interesting. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. What's interesting? Nothing. Baligaju tidied his robe, looked at the secret passage leading to the tomb, and said, It's just that when I saw this tomb, I suddenly thought of an old friend. Hellion Vivian's interest was piqued. An old friend? Don't tell me it's an iPhone? It's not the kind of person who is important for no reason. Baligaju only gave Hellion Vivian this sentence, and then escorted her into the tomb. He did not tell Hellion Vivian that the old friend he mentioned was actually her previous life. The exorcist immortal who was rumored to be the one he was most afraid of. She should have lived was in this area at that time, because he was on the mountain. Although he didn't meet that immortal face to face, he could feel the Buddhist aura surrounding Taibai Mountain at that time. He did not know what the original true form of that Buddhist chi was. He could even sense it from the Devil Realm, which was 3 feet underground. At that time, he didn't have much interest in conquering the demon realm. He just liked to kill and hunt. The most interesting thing was to see the struggle and cowardice of humans in the face of death. Under normal circumstances, those humans would cry and beg God to save them. Was God? He were AO of them. As of him, he were exorcist devil at the very least. He could help them complete their revenge, and he could help them get the wealth they wanted the most. Of course, all of this had to be exchanged with their souls. However, he gradually realized that those souls were too common. Everyone was almost the same. They were all greedy, and they were all boring. That was why he still felt unsatisfied. It was not until he came into contact with the familiar Buddha's aura that his impetuous blood gradually calmed down. Judging from Father's expression, he's not thinking about his old lover, is he? Hellion Vivian's bigger fetus moved in her belly. He snorted and said to the smaller fetus, I knew he was unreliable. Once Big Brother is out, I'll take Mother and you to a faraway place. The smaller fetus once again had the urge to face bomb. After all, his older brother was too professional in slandering his father. He seemed to be able to predict how impatient his father would be when he saw them after they left. He would probably throw them to the palace maids to take care of them. After all, His father had zero tolerance for anyone who disturbed him and his mother. But, big brother, did your power change today? The smaller fetus asked with wide eyes. The bigger fetus was still holding the smaller fetus carefully, as if he was protecting him. His voice was cool and soft. Yes. Once we're in the cemetery, my power will increase. Big brother knows you can't get used to it. When the time comes, you don't have to help big brother purify it. Just close your eyes and have a good sleep. Don't worry about those demons. They can't hurt mother. Father is still there. I'm not worried about the demons. As long as father exudes his aura, they will naturally retreat. Just like that thing under the waterfall today. It ran away faster than the little loaches when it saw father. I'm worried that the Yin energy in the cemetery will be too strong, and mother will be invaded by evil spirits. If that's the case, The smaller fetus did not finish his words. The bigger fetus interrupted him and said flatly, Big brother is here. The smaller fetus looked at the bigger fetus in front of him with his red eyes. Then he smiled and nodded, completely trusting him. The bigger fetus patted his back clumsily and domineeringly. The two little ones hugged each other with their foreheads touching. It was a warm and loving scene. It was said that a mother and her child were connected by heart. Hellion Vivian smiled and caressed her lower abdomen, probably because she heard the sound in her stomach. Her face was full of gentleness. After entering the cemetery, everyone seemed to have quietened down, especially when the official old man looked at the tombstone in front of him, his whole body trembling. The exorcists' faces also began to become solemn. No, we still can't. The old man shook his head and said mysteriously, We can't go in. Once the thing inside is released, we won't be able to lock it back in. Since they had already come this far, how could an Biao give up? He looked at the old man and said with a smile, Elder Zhang, don't worry. We're all people who know Taoist techniques. We can lock it back in no matter what happens. As he said that, he ignored the old man's objection and ordered the Ni family's disciples behind him. Go and open the door. Remember to take the dog's blood-red rope. If anything happens, act immediately. Yes, the Ni family's disciples were very fast. Zhuge Yun wanted to stop them, but he knew that it was useless because the other exorcists also wanted to open the door to the tomb and get the Saraira. Chapter 742. The stone door was engraved with a sculpture of a beast with a human face. It gave off an eerie feeling that one should not offend. The Ni family was about to walk over. He didn't know where the wind came from, but it made a strange light sound. Then someone shouted, Look, what is that? Hellion Vivian followed the person's finger and looked over. At dusk, beside the originally empty tomb, a meandering river appeared on both sides of the tomb. The water slowly flowed down the mountain. It was extremely deep. The water was clean, and there were aquatic plants growing in the river. It looked harmless on the surface. However, Hellion Vivian found it strange that there was not a single fish in the water. The most bizarre thing was that not only were there no fish, there were no other creatures besides the seaweed. The color of the seaweed was very dark, and all of them grew in the dark, floating above the river. From afar, it looked like the long hair of a drowned woman floating in the air. Moreover, they all saw that there was no river here. Why did a river appear when they were about to enter the tomb? Could it be a warning to them? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at the changes in the river vigilantly. The other exorcists had never encountered such a situation. They looked at each other and gripped the peachwood swords in their hands tightly. Ni Biao was very excited. He looked at the river in front of him and said in high spirits, It is said that the Yin River will appear when the sun goes down near the tomb. I didn't have the chance to see it before, but now that I have seen it, it is indeed a river that can connect the two realms of Yin and Yang. It is really amazing. Hearing the words Yin River, the exorcists were stunned. The Yin River was recorded in the Book of Exorcism. It was said that this river could not be seen during the day. Only at night, under the illumination of the moonlight, would a small flowing river appear. This river connected the two realms of Yin and Yang. Crossing it would allow one to pass through life and death, and find the secret of immortality. Therefore, the exorcists' eyes were shining. They did not think of any warnings, and were about to wade through the water. However, Helian Weiwei's group of people were all very steady and did not rush to move forward. At this time, the old man looked at the river and suddenly trembled. "You can't go." "Why?" Some of the exorcists turned around and asked. The old man pointed at one end of the river with a trembling finger. Only then did the exorcists realize that there was a coffin standing there. Placing a coffin in the water was an ominous sign in feng shui, not to mention that it had appeared in the Yin River. The old man, Guando, seemed to be very afraid of the coffin. He said with conviction, "I've seen it before. It has appeared before. Everyone, do not open the tomb. Didn't you never come to the mausoleum? How could you have seen the coffins here?" And I, who did not take it seriously. In his eyes, this old man was just a precaution, who knew that he would be so troublesome, and always wanted to stop them. He did not even try to find out how powerful the Anai family was. Did he think that he could fool him by lying? Guando. The old man knew that Anai who did not believe him, so he started to talk about his past. He had indeed seen this coffin before. At that time, there was a village at the mountainside. At that time, a rich official came to their village and wanted to enter the mausoleum. No villagers dared to go with him, so the official wandered around the mountainside every day. He remembered very clearly that a coffin floated in the river that night. It was probably because the official's search team had disturbed something during that time. The official ignored their obstruction and did not listen to his advice. He insisted on digging the coffin out of the river. Digging in the ground in broad daylight could have avoided some danger. However, at the moment the coffin was out of the river, countless vampire bats flew out of the forest. Those flying bats seemed to be a warning. People in the underworld knew that if there was something strange on the day of the coffin opening, it was a bad omen. The official was greedy and did not listen to anyone's advice. He said that this was a tomb within a tomb. As long as the coffin was lifted, they could enter the tomb and find the treasure of immortality. Therefore, even though he knew that opening the coffin was dangerous, he still ordered his men to continue with the work without delay. Since he could not stop it from happening, the old man could only tell the official that once the ancient coffin was out of the river, he must use the dog blood red rope to mark the coffin. He thought that by doing so, at least some danger could be avoided. However, before the ancient coffin was out of the river, there was a sudden rainstorm in the forest. The sound of nightingales could be heard in the forest, one after another, louder than the other, making people's hair stand on end. The official had no choice but to stop the work, because it was impossible to drag a coffin that weighed more than 100 kilograms out of the river in such bad weather. At first, the old man was secretly relieved. However, he did not expect that by the next day, those who wanted to lift the ancient coffin would die one by one. Those who had a weak life force died that night, while those who had a strong life force only survived until dawn. The official's death was even more strange. First, he was hungry and kept eating. Everything in his mouth tasted tasteless. In the end, he stopped eating and told the servants that he was sleepy and wanted to sleep. In the end, after dawn, the official's wife knocked on the door many times, but no one came to open it. She ordered the servants to break in through the window and found that the official was already dead. He was in a very strange position, lying on the ground. No wound could be found, but there was an indescribable distortion on his face, as if he had seen something extremely horrible. No one knew what he had seen, but what made people feel uneasy was that his whole body was wet, as if he had been soaked in the river. But in fact, the official's wife said that he had not left the room for the whole night. Then where did the river water come from? No one dared to guess, and no one dared to go near the coffin. However, this did not prevent the disaster from happening. The villagers started to fall ill inexplicably, and the children started to cry at night. As long as one saw the opening of the coffin, they would have nightmares at night, even if they moved out of the village. The old man thought that he was going to die at that time, if he did not have a dream later on. A woman appeared in his dream. That woman's every movement was filled with subduing nobility and elegance. She was bright and dazzling. There seemed to be a Buddhist light slowly flowing around her body. She exuded a faint sandalwood fragrance. She was like a faintly discernible phoenix, making people involuntarily feel at ease when they looked at her. Chapter 743. The woman said that in order to get through this ordeal, each family had to offer their blood, no more no less. They just had to put it outside the door late at night. The old man was still a teenager at that time. Although he was young, he had already started his career as an official. Although he was not proficient in Taoism, he knew the general idea. He had heard of people using dog's blood to exorcise evil spirits. But who would use human blood to exorcise evil spirits? However, the old man still followed the woman's instructions and asked the villagers to do it. After all, they had no choice but to give up after reaching that stage. What they didn't expect was that after that, no one in the village had any more dreams, and no one died for no reason. However, the pot of blood that was placed outside the window was taken away by someone. Later on, the river overflowed that year and flooded many fields. It also submerged the exposed ancient black wood coffin at the bottom of the river. It had been submerged for a full 40 years. Now this ancient coffin had appeared again. The old man's fear was imaginable. He looked at the ancient black wood coffin with trembling eyes, and his heart gradually sank. Naturally, he would not let the exorcists go over no matter what. After listening to the old man's story, Anarchic thought for a while, and suddenly his eyes lit up. You said that the woman in your dream had the phoenix spell on her, right? The old man nodded. Then it should be the phoenix girl. Anarchic laughed. Then what's there to be afraid of? Let me tell you. My elder sister is the reincarnation of the phoenix girl. Look at her carefully. Isn't she similar to the woman in your dream? As he spoke, Anarchic pointed at an iPhone. An iPhone was wearing a veil, and only a pair of gentle eyes could be seen. The old man felt that the all-encompassing aura was familiar. Seeing that the old man did not deny it, Anarchic was even more proud. He smiled at the exorcists. Everyone, don't worry. With my elder sister here, all problems can be solved. As he spoke, he deliberately glanced at Hellion Vivian and the rest, and said coldly, after entering the tomb, we will begin to divide into groups. Those who follow the Ni family will not be in danger. Those who deliberately go against the Ni family, don't blame the Ni family for not helping you when the time comes. Everyone knew who he was referring to with that last sentence. Anarchic thought that the two amateurs would regret it and come to beg them. Unexpectedly, the other party had no intention of apologizing at all. Instead, he took the lead and walked to the front. When Hellion Vivian's side profile passed by the old man, she still had a lazy smile on her face. Beligaju stood beside her. His elegance was indifferent, and his temperament was like water. The old man paused for a moment, and then rubbed his eyes. He must have seen wrongly. How could a man be the benefactor in his dreams? Although this was what the old man thought, he still placed his gaze on Hellion Vivian's face. He felt that the more he looked at her, the more he felt that they were similar. However, he knew in his heart that it was impossible for the other party to be him. Such a person exuded spiritual energy all over her body, which was very similar to the veiled young lady of the Ni family. Another one who was deceived. Zhuge Yun said softly. His clear eyes looked at the coffin in the middle of the Yin River. The old man's dream is indeed related to the Phoenix girl. However, if the young lady of the Ni family is not the Phoenix girl, we will definitely encounter a lot of dangers in the tomb. Brother Wei, Brother Ju, you must be more careful. Especially you, Brother Wei. I know that you are smart and know what ordinary people don't. But after all, you don't have spiritual energy to protect your body. Don't act alone, and we can't get separated. Hellion Vivian saw that Zhuge Yun was serious, so she did not reject his kindness. She only smiled meaningfully. Okay. She did not expect that she would appear in someone's dream in her previous life. She felt that it was quite novel, and her furry head moved along. Beligaju reached out and held her hand. His voice was faint. Are you very happy? Hellion Vivian said to Beligaju in a tone that only the two of them could hear. It's always refreshing to hear someone talk about their past life. Beligaju looked at her smiling eyes. He was very dissatisfied with the current situation. If these people were not here, he could kiss her face. However, she was wearing men's clothing, so it was not convenient for him to do anything. If you want to know about your past life, you can ask me. Hearing this, Hellion Vivian was stunned. She asked with interest, "You know about my past life? Did we know each other in our past life?" "Not really." Beligage's deep voice was very pleasant to hear. "Do you still remember the exorcist immortal that the little king of hell said that I was afraid of?" His voice was slow and graceful. "That was the Phoenix girl from back then, your past life." After Hellion Vivian heard this, her beautiful eyes narrowed. She smiled very proudly. "So in my past life I was stronger than you. I defeated you, right?" "Beligaju, this stupid woman always has a different kind of obsession when it comes to dueling with me. I thought that you had already given up on this unrealistic idea." Beligaju glanced coldly at Hellion Vivian beside him. That glance fully displayed his disapproval. This made Hellion Vivian raise her eyebrows. "Is that not the case?" "Of course not. We haven't fought at all, nor have we met face to face." Beligage's voice was as indifferent as usual. But compared to before, it was not as smooth as before. There was a pause. Hellion Vivian looked at his darkened eyes and smiled lazily. Her smile was as bright as the light, and she had the demeanor of a queen. "I thought so too. We haven't met face to face in our past life. Otherwise, how could I not keep such a good-looking man like you and make you my husband? But it doesn't matter. It's the same in this life. Idiot." Bailey Jiaju chuckled softly and leaned close to her ear. His warm breath was tingling as it hit the back of her neck. "You're right. It's impossible for me to not tie you up after seeing you again. You're asking for a beating." The two of them had been together for so long. Of course, Hellion Vivian knew what Beligaju meant by asking for a beating. Her face flushed. She did not look at the man's seductive smile anymore. Instead, she changed the topic. "It's strange." "What's strange?" Beligaju held Hellion Vivian's hand as if no one was around. In fact, no one could hear their conversation, because everyone's eyes were focused on admiring an iPhone. Hellion Vivian looked around, and did not forget to reply to Beligaju. "Logically speaking, one of us is an exorcist, and the other is a demon. We should have fought. Even if we didn't fight, we should have met face to face. After all, we're on opposite sides. Why does it sound so peaceful when you say it?" She was indeed the little one he raised. She was so smart that she could detect all the problems. This was also what Beligaju had been thinking about recently. Chapter 744. Maybe it was just like what the little king of hell said, that they knew each other back then. At the very least she knew him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have stood behind him and watched him leave. Beligage's beautiful eyes deepened. If they really knew each other, it was before he fell from heaven. Why? Hellion Vivian looked at him from the side. "Is it that hard to answer? I thought we would love to kill each other. Exorcists and demons are such good material." Beligage laughed. "Exorcists? That's what normal people think. In fact, you weren't human at that time." "Not human? Then what was I?" Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Beligage's voice was faint. "God. A phoenix in fire born from nirvana. A person with such a dharma could very well be related to the gods and Buddhas." Hellion Vivian was even more puzzled. She muttered to herself, "If I were a god, I would have gone to find trouble with you. Why didn't I fight with you? What a pity, I wasted such a good opportunity." "You really want to fight with me?" Bailey Jiaju turned around abruptly. While no one was looking at them, he lowered his head and kissed her ear. He loosened his grip as soon as he touched it. He was very gentle. "Sure. If you lose, you'll be at my disposal." Hellion Vivian didn't say anything else. Her face turned even redder. When Zhuge Yin turned around, his face was full of confusion. Did something happen? Hellion Vivian coughed lightly and continued to walk forward with a lazy expression. On the contrary, Bailey Jiaju's mood was much better. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. The light of the torch shone into his eyes and was reflected. The surface of his skin presented a kind of diamond-like texture, and one could vaguely see the evil gold. Zhuge Yin wanted to take a closer look, but Beligaju looked up and glanced at him lightly. His elegance was almost enchanting. Zhuge Yin shook his head. He must have seen wrongly. How could such a person have a demonic nature? However, as a human, Zhuge Yun did not know that demons had extremely strong imitation abilities. When they first entered the world, they had already learned the human's obsession and greed incisively and vividly. Therefore, at times high-level demons could be as elegant as gentlemen. The inexperienced Zhuge Yun did not pay much attention to it, and continued to follow the group. People deliberately avoided the black wooden coffin. The old man was right. That ancient coffin was indeed very strange. The coffin was covered in markings, and there was a yellow talisman stuck to the coffin. The yellow talisman was from a very long time ago, and if it wasn't for the demon-binding frost iron chain, it would have been washed away by the current. Fortunately, exorcism could resist external forces. Even so, no one could afford to be careless. He did not know if it was Anaihu's illusion, but he felt that the black wooden coffin would follow them wherever they went. Finally, they went around the Ain River and reached a distance where they could push open the door of the tomb. At this moment, Anaihu rolled his eyes and a sinister plan came to his mind. Brother Yin, since you're the first to arrive, shouldn't you be the one to open the door of the tomb? What? Zhuge Yun did not expect Anaihu to do this. Anai Biao also knew what his beloved son was thinking. He glanced around, and the two disciples of the Anai family immediately put away the dog-blood red rope and demon-binding frost iron chain that they had prepared. Anaihu laughed arrogantly. Why, Brother Yin? Are you afraid? That's impossible. Wasn't your team the first to arrive at the tomb? Why don't you dare to open the door? Zhuge Yun knew that Anaihu did it on purpose. Every exorcist knew how dangerous it was for the first person to open the door to the tomb. The methane from the underground would gush out immediately. If the exorcist was not full of spiritual energy, it was very likely that he would die from the methane. Moreover, this was not an ordinary tomb, but a 1,000-year-old tomb. No one knew what would happen if they opened the door of the tomb. Brother Yun, we're all waiting. There's not much time left, hurry up. Anaihu gloated and urged, waiting to see Hellion Vivian and the rest put on a good show. He knew about Zhuge Yun's power. Although he had the strongest spiritual power in his generation, it was not enough to open the door of the tomb. However, it was far from enough to open the tomb. The chances of it being a disaster were extremely high. As for the other two amateurs, Anaihu did not even consider them. They might be able to fight, but they might not be able to resist the evil of the tomb. Looking at their empty hands, it was obvious that they were not qualified exorcists. Firstly, they did not have the Chinese talisman, and secondly, they did not have the dog-blood red rope. No matter how one looked at it, they were just looking for death. He was not afraid that Zhuge Yun would refuse. Once he refused, the Zhuge family's victory would not be counted. No matter how one looked at it, the Anai family was the one who got the better end of the deal. After all, it was the rules of the competition. Although the other exorcists knew that Anaihu was being unethical, it was still a competition. A competition was a competition. One had to abide by the rules. If one could not win, one should not win. Zhuge Yun looked at Anaihu's provocative gaze and knew that he had to accept it. All right, but I have a request. I'll go alone. Anyway, it's just opening the tomb door. My other two teammates will stay outside. Of course, we're not unreasonable people. As long as Brother Yin follows the rules of the competition and opens the tomb door, it'll be fine. Anaihu sneered in his heart. He only wanted one of the three to die. As for the other two, he was not in a hurry. Zhuge Yun bit his thin lips. Holding the peachwood sword he was about to go over. A slender figure blocked his way. The figure was tall and straight, exuding a strong aura of abstinence. I'll open it. Zhuge Yun paused and wanted to refuse. However, His Highness had always done things his own way, and would not give anyone a chance to speak. He strolled over and curled his thin lips into a faint smile. The moment their eyes met, Anaihu's heart skipped a beat. Perhaps it was because of the light in the graveyard. His skin was too pale. Or perhaps it was because of the contrast between his white and blue robes. But his eyes were clearly shining with golden light. Yet it made people feel that his eyes were incomparably distant. Anaihu was confused. Why did he feel that this man was excited? It's good to know nothing. Anai Biao smiled kindly with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. You don't even know what might happen when you open the tomb door. You still have the right to be arrogant. Old people like us can't do it. We never dare to take on things that we can't do." After saying that, he shook his head regretfully, as if he was worried about Beligaju. He seemed to be sure that Beligaju would not be able to walk back alive. The rest of the exorcists shared the same opinion as Inai Biao. They also felt that this was an extraordinary matter that an ordinary outsider could not do. Chapter 745. Brother Wei. Zhuge Yun looked at Hellion Vivian anxiously. "Ask Brother Zhu to come back. Opening the tomb door is not an easy task. Let me go instead. At least I'll have a chance to survive." Hellion Vivian smiled. "Young Master Yun, you have to learn to trust your teammates." Zhuge Yun did not know what to say. Not only did he trust him, but he was also afraid of Brother Zhu. Otherwise, he would not have asked Brother Wei to persuade him. "It's all right." Hellion Vivian patted the young man's shoulder. "It's just opening a door." Zhuge Yun wanted to roar. "What do you mean by it's just a door? This is not their home. This is a tomb, a 1,000-year-old tomb." Zhuge Yun knew that if Brother Wei did not ask, Brother Zhu would not come back. He was so anxious that his face turned pale. His hand that was pressing on the peach wood sword clenched tightly. Inai who looked at the scene and felt a little better. The smile on his face grew wider. He was waiting to see Zhuge Yun's team cry. However, Bailey Jiaju didn't put him in his eyes at all. His slightly curly long hair followed the cloak and fell vertically, sweeping across the ice-cold steps, as deep as the night. Under the dim light of the torch, he casually raised one hand. His white teeth scratched his black gloves and tightened them. His handsome and clear face had a hint of arrogance. It was an ordinary action, but when he did it, it brought out a sense of superiority, as if he was a noble who only appeared in King of England movies. Hellion Vivian looked at him. There was never a moment like this where she felt that he was a complete demon. He confused people's eyes and bewitched people's hearts. It seemed that after entering the ancient tomb, his demonic nature had become stronger. That kind of aloofness and omnipotence was becoming more and more apparent. However, no one knew. In Inaihu's eyes, he was just a good-looking boy. All the exorcists took a step back, thinking that he had to do something to open the tomb. However, Beligaju did not do anything. He smiled and pressed his black-gloved fingers on the tomb door. Then he exerted force. A loud rumbling sound rang out. What greeted them were clusters of black feathers that streaked across the sky and let out a long, sharp whistle. They danced and fell from the sky as if they were alive. The exorcists were all shocked. They all picked up the peach with swords in their hands and hurriedly pointed at the entrance of the tomb. Only Beligaju's tall figure didn't change in the slightest. He strode out from the cluster of feathers. As the feathers fell to the ground, everything in the ancient tomb moved away, becoming a backdrop for him. Black rose up and filled the sky. He stood in the shadow of the feathers with a smile that was not a smile. The smooth curve of his chin reminded Hellion Vivian of the scene when she saw him in the demon world. 80 miles down, the Yellow Springs blue sky, the flowers of the other shore in bloom. He walked inside, his back tall and straight, his long robe fluttering in the wind, causing countless demons to tremble. That was the true king of darkness. Just like how he was now. Compared to Beligaju's elegance and calmness, the rest of the exorcists seemed to have gone crazy. They pulled out their swords and began to cut off the strange feathers, afraid that they would provoke something unclean. However, they did not expect that as soon as they raised their hands, the feathers would disappear without a trace. What's going on? Inai, who had never encountered such a strange thing. He thought that the feathers had drilled into his body and wanted to shake it off in panic. Although this group of people were all exorcists, they were people from ancient times after all. Their minds were filled with ghosts and nothing else. When they realized that their Taoist techniques could not be used, they would definitely panic. Among them, Inai Biao's expression was still normal, but the rest were not so shocked. The most unbelievable thing was that Beligaju was still alive. Moreover, there was no trace of injury on his body. How was this possible? Inai widened his eyes and stared at Beligaju. How could you be completely fine? Even he could not guarantee that he could come back alive, but it was as if it was as simple as opening a door. Bailey Jiaju didn't even look at him. He just casually brushed off his own green and white robes. And I, who had never been belittled like this before. His voice became hoarse as he asked, "Did you do something to it? Or were you possessed by the evil spirit on the feather? Is that why you?" Young master and I. Before and I who could finish his sentence, Hellion Weiwei interrupted him with a languid voice. "The feather that you're talking about is not real. Every time we open an ancient tomb, we will definitely encounter this situation. When the 1,000-year-old murals in ancient tombs come into contact with the air, the paint of the murals will fall off and evaporate. After a wonderful reaction with the air, it will appear as if it is really alive. But in fact, it is just an illusion. Otherwise, how could the feathers disappear just like that? Young master and I, before you suspect others in the future, use your brain and see what is on the walls of the tomb." After Hellion Vivian's reminder, the exorcist saw the black feathers engraved on the walls. Everyone roared with laughter. Of course, they were laughing at Anihu's words. Anihu's entire face was red, but he had nothing to refute Hellion Vivian. He could only stand there, wishing that he could take back his words. The exorcists were still laughing. However, when they thought about it carefully, even they were flustered when the tomb was opened, let alone the others. The only ones who were calm from the beginning to the end, other than the eldest daughter of the Ani family, were these two foreign exorcists. Furthermore, what did this person mean by volatilizing? Was this something that a normal person would know? What was even more unexpected was that the Guando elder actually agreed. This young master is right. The illusion during the tomb opening is occasionally encountered when we rob tombs. If the other party had not mentioned it, he would have forgotten about it. He was really ashamed. He was not a competent Guando elder at all. Thinking of this, the Guando elder turned around and said to the group, "With this young master here, there is no need for me to follow. He knows more than me. And the one who opened the tomb door is fearless. I have never seen such a person before. I really admire him." "You flatter me. I only know a little. It is better to have an elder with me." Hellion Vivian had always been polite. She lowered her head to the Guando elder in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. The Guando elder was a little dazed at that moment, similar. Chapter 746. At this time, the exorcists who heard the old man's words began to discuss. "Zhuge Yun's family is really amazing this time. I thought they were lucky to be the first to arrive. But now it seems that their ability is on par with the Inai family. This is too shocking." Who said otherwise? Even Oldly acknowledged them. The exorcists' voices were getting louder and louder. Inai who felt extremely unbalanced when he heard that. Thinking about the laughter he received just now, and then looking at the people around him who were treating Zhuge Yun and the rest as heroes, a strong sense of unwillingness rushed into his mind. "Isn't it just opening a tomb door? What's so great about it?" Inai who said as he took a step forward with the servant beside him. "Any disciple of the Inai family can do it." "You." Zhuge Yun was so angry that he wanted to walk over, but Hellion Vivian blocked his way. Zhuge Yun turned around in confusion. Hellion Vivian smiled with a hint of meaning. "Let them go." "Why?" "They were the ones who opened the tomb door first." Zhuge Yun was even more confused. He raised his hand and scratched the back of his head. Inai who swaggered forward. The two disciples of the Inai family on his left and right thought that nothing was going on. Without thinking, they pushed the remaining half of the door to the side. Inai who was still smiling. His eyes were full of contempt when he looked at Hellion Vivian and the rest. What he did not expect was that in the next second, the two Inai family disciples in front of him seemed to have been bewitched, as they fell forward in a daze. There was an indescribable eerie smile on their faces, as if they had seen something before they died. In just a moment, Inai whose expression changed. Even his legs were trembling, because if it were not for the two disciples in front of him, the one who would be dead now would be him. The fear that he had never felt before was like an invisible hand that firmly grasped Inaihu's heart. Even his breathing was sluggish. The other exorcists also froze in their actions at that moment. Horror slowly spread in their eyes, reflecting the faces of the dead. Inai Biao reacted the fastest. He pulled Inaihu back, worried that something might happen to his beloved son. There was a deathly silence at the scene. No one had expected that a moment ago, they were still chatting, and the next moment, such a situation would occur. What made them most uneasy was that there were no signs at all. Whether it was a vengeful spirit or a ghost, they didn't even see it. They just pushed open the door of the tomb, and 2 people died for no reason. The exorcists all had different expressions on their faces. A tense atmosphere quietly spread among the crowd. "We'd better be careful," someone reminded him. "The mausoleum is a 1,000-year-old tomb. It's different from the usual tombs. It's best not to rashly move forward." Obviously, this sentence was directed at the young master of the Ni family, who wanted to show off. When Ni Biao heard this, he was naturally displeased, but he could not show it on his face. After all, in this situation, he really could not let his guard down. But how did they die? This was what scared all the exorcists the most. They were not afraid of ghosts and demons. At the very least, they could see those things. What they were most afraid of was that some things were out of their control. Zhuge Yin looked at the side of Hellion Vivian's face. He did not know why, but his intuition told him that Brother Wei would definitely know the answer. Hellion Vivian smiled. She indeed knew. Marsh gas is also known as poisonous gas. After the ancient tomb has not been opened for a long time, after the air evaporates, only marsh gas that is harmful to the human body is left. If you don't pay attention, you will be poisoned. A few casual words, but it attracted the attention of the exorcists again. How does this person know everything? That's amazing. Is he really a newbie? He doesn't look like one at all. He really doesn't have spiritual energy. Think about it carefully. The things he said are not even mentioned in the exorcism books. So he doesn't know exorcism, but he knows ancient tombs very well? It's more than that. Didn't you hear what Elderly said? If this person is here, there's no need for him to come. This means that he knows at least as much as Elderly. As much as Elderly? Someone was shocked. From the initial indifference to the current amazement, the exorcists could not describe their current feelings. They truly realized how strong the Zhuge family was this time. Ni Biao's eyes narrowed dangerously when no one was paying attention. It seemed that he had to get rid of these 3 eyesores. They only knew a little about the 8 diagrams of the tomb, but they had embarrassed the Ni family time and time again. If he did not get rid of them, they would most likely be a problem in the future. He would not let go of any obstacles that blocked his way. It was not the right time to make a move. Once they entered the tomb, and the teams separated, he would let these 3 have a taste of the Ni family's methods. Even now, Ni Biao still felt that the other party was not afraid of them. Understanding the graveyard would be a great help to them. But if they really wanted to reach the end, they would have to rely on their own spiritual power and exorcism. Among the 3 people, 2 of them had no cultivation at all. Such a team could only shine at the very beginning. Soon they would have nowhere to cry. There were also exorcists who had the same thoughts as Ni Biao. Although they were impressed, they had to take a long-term view. Therefore, they did not participate in the discussion. They just looked at the absent-minded Elder Guando and asked, "Elderly, can we go forward now?" Elderly finally came back to his senses and said, "Yes, we can go now. Keep your eyes open." Okay. Even without Senior Li's reminder, everyone's attention was raised. They were highly concentrated and didn't dare to be distracted. They stepped forward, deliberately bypassed the corpses lying on the ground, and walked into the tomb door one by one. The cemetery was very spacious. It was so magnificent that it was like an underground palace. Even the ground under their feet was made of stone, not to mention those statues. What are these things? One of the Ni family's disciples stretched out his hand and pointed curiously at the black iron-like thing that covered the statues. After looking at it for a long time, he did not know what it was. He could only see that it was faintly glowing. Elderly saw it and immediately shouted, "Don't touch it." The Ni family's disciple was so frightened that he immediately retracted his hand. Chapter 747. Those are insects that eat the flesh of corpses. Don't touch them. You won't be able to get rid of them if you touch them. Elder Li's voice was so low that it made the hearts of those who heard it sink. The exorcists fell silent once again. Ni Feng, the eldest daughter of the Ni family, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke with a gentle voice. Are you talking about corpse puppets, Elderly? That's right. Elderly turned around as if he had seen the light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't expect Miss Anai to know about corpse puppets. You're really knowledgeable. Anai Feng smiled gently. The translucent white veil on her face accentuated her ethereal beauty. It's nothing. As an exorcist, it's normal for me to know about this. Elderly knew that she was being modest. Looking at the exorcist's reactions, he knew that corpse puppets would not be born in normal tombs. Firstly, the tombs were not deep enough, and secondly, they had not been there for long enough. Only those who frequently raided tombs would have come into contact with corpse puppets. She must be extraordinary to know about this. Elder Li's initial suspicion was dispelled once again. He must have robbed too many tombs to have an illusion that he should not have. The real reincarnation of the Phoenix girl was right in front of him. But he felt that the handsome and clean young man was his savior in his dreams. Indeed, he was old and his mind was muddled. Elderly shook his head and did not say anything. Instead, he took a step forward and raised the torch in his hand to illuminate the path ahead, leaving behind a group of exorcists who were worshipping Anai Feng. You're indeed the Phoenix girl. You even know about this. If we can get the Sarira this time, my team will be convinced even if we lose. If we can be defeated by Miss Anai, this trip will not be in vain. Seeing this, Anai, whose pale face immediately broke into a smile. He glanced at Hellion Vivian and the rest and said slowly, My sister has always been knowledgeable and low-key. Unlike some people who only know a little and insist on showing it. I'm afraid they're just talking. When they really encounter something later, they'll be scared out of their wits. Take corpse puppets as an example. Some people are still having a headache over how to deal with them. Everyone could tell who he was referring to. The exorcists had to admit that Anai whose words made sense. After all, it was only because of the environment of the ancient tomb that Zhuge Yun's group seemed to be very powerful. In fact, no one had seen them fight with their own eyes. However, Hellion Vivian and her team did not take Anai whose provocation seriously, especially His Highness. Wherever he looked, there was only Hellion Vivian and Hellion Vivian. To him, other humans were just dispensable food. He did not even bother to destroy their souls, because they did not smell fresh. Hellion Vivian didn't understand why His Highness' expression looked like a cat that was picky about its food. She just felt that his noble, elegant and disdainful arrogance was very much like him when he was young. His cute little highness, she really wanted to hold him in her hand and pinch him. Hellion Vivian thought so and did as she was told. Beligaju was a little confused by her pinch. He raised his thick eyebrows and said wickedly, Do you want me to help you remove your claws again? Hellion Vivian's bright and clear eyes had a perfect smile. She said in a roguish manner, No, I want to kiss you. Unfortunately, there are people around. Anyway, she knew that His Highness did not like to be watched, so she did not have to worry about him sneaking up on her. Naturally, she would tease him freely. You seem to be very proud of yourself. Beligaju smiled. His voice was so low that it was sexy. Hellion Vivian continued to walk forward in a good mood. She was sure that he would not have a chance to do anything to her. She found the fun of teasing His Highness again. Bailey Jiaju also didn't stop her, only slightly leaned his body forward a bit. From the side angle, it looked extremely natural, but in reality, he was already very close to Wei Wei. His long and thick eyelashes followed his movements, forming a shadow, brimming with bewitchment. Wait until there's no one else, then this highness will fulfill your wish. Hellion Vivian suddenly froze. Wasn't she the one who was teasing him? Why did it seem to be the opposite in the end? And she knew that His Highness had always been a man of his words. Ahem. Hellion Vivian lowered her voice and said in a tone that only the two of them could hear. Actually, this kind of thing doesn't have to be done. How can I do that? I am a demon raised by my master. Beligage's voice slowly rose. His whole body was full of asceticism. Of course I have to satisfy all of my master's needs at all times. Hellion Vivian. So it had to be done. No, that was not right. In any case, young Master Yun would always be with them. His Highness might not have a chance to make a move. Imperial Mother still believes in Imperial Father's character too much. The smaller fetus heard the noise outside and slowly woke up. There was a smile in his weak voice. The bigger fetus reached out to protect the smaller fetus. He asked in a cool and gentle voice, "Does Imperial Father have any character?" The smaller fetus, Big Brother, really did not like Imperial Father. He had already started to criticize him. Compared to the happy family of 4, the others were like headless flies. They stood in place, not knowing which path to take, because they found 4 entrances in the surroundings. There was a stone sculpture in each of the 4 directions. They were all big monsters that ran rampant in the world. It seemed that choosing any one of them would not end well. However, at this moment, someone suddenly shouted, "Where are Filial Sun and Guazi? Where did they go?" Filial Sun and Guazi were the 2 disciples of the Ni family who had just died. Hearing the noise, Helly and Vivian immediately turned around. The 2 corpses that were originally lying on the ground were really gone. There was no trace left behind. How did they disappear? Was there someone else in this graveyard other than them? Or were they moving corpses? But would there be a shadow of a moving corpse? Where were they? Questions popped up one after another. The mature exorcists did not care. After all, even if they were moving corpses, they were not afraid. The yellow talismans on them were enough to deal with it. However, Enihu, who did not have much ability, was a little scared. He did not pay attention to his feet, and accidentally bumped into the corpse puppet on the stone statue behind him. A dull creaking sound came from all directions just like that. Come and update tomorrow. Moi. Chapter 748. What's that sound? Enihu was already scared. Now that he heard the sound again, he turned around to look. The exorcists slowly widened their eyes and shouted, "It's a corpse puppet! Get out of the way!" Enihu also noticed that less than 10 centimeters away from him, the black worm that was originally attached to the stone statue had awakened. Its hard antennae stretched forward like 2 sharp bayonets, moving quickly in the direction of where he was standing. Enihu was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He supported himself with both hands on the ground and retreated backward, as if he was running for his life. As he retreated, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Father, save me!" That appearance of his, who was scared witless, was indescribably embarrassing. Enibiao was too far away to help him. The exorcists closest to Enihu could not care less about winning or losing. They could not just watch Enihu die. He threw the dog blood red rope in his hand forward and lifted him up. With a tug, he was finally able to avoid the danger of having his stomach ripped open by the corpse puppet. Enihu did not relax immediately, because the corpse puppet was aiming at him. There was no way to get rid of it. After he stood still, he hurriedly took out all the things in his bag. He had no idea how to deal with the corpse puppet. If Enifeng had not reminded him to use the yellow talisman to ignite the fire, he was afraid that he would not know what to do. With a solution, Enihu was no longer afraid. He took out all the yellow talismans on him, ignited them with spiritual energy, and threw them at the corpse puppet. There was a whoosh. The entire corpse puppet was set ablaze by him. It was originally something from the graveyard, so it was destroyed very quickly by the spiritual fire. Listening to the crackling sounds, Enihu heaved a sigh of relief and fell to the ground. However, Elderly shouted at this moment. He kept muttering, "Oh no, oh no." Enihu did not have the chance to ask what was wrong. Behind the corpse puppet that he had burned to death, a large number of black objects surged towards him like fast-flowing water, accompanied by creaking sounds that made one's hair stand on end. Enihu was dumbfounded. His eyes slowly widened, and his calves began to twitch violently. He did not even know how many times he had swallowed his saliva. A person's survival instinct would unleash unlimited potential. Enihu did not hesitate and quickly ran to the back. He needed a scapegoat. Baligaju happened to be standing behind him. As long as he ran past the man, the corpse puppets would be able to devour this arrogant layman. In this way, no one would think that he was a coward. In order to save his life, Enihu's mind was extremely vicious. As he ran, the exorcists were stunned and quickly spread out in all directions. Everyone took out a yellow talisman. Enihu was sweating profusely from running. After he ran past Beligaju, he slowed down and quickly dodged to the side. He pressed his hands on his knees and panted as he looked at Beligaju, who was about to face the tide of corpse puppets. The corners of his mouth curled upward. I don't believe that I can't kill you this time. Brother Zhu. Zhuge Yin widened his eyes and wanted to rush over with his mahogany sword. However, there was no time left. The corpse puppets came too fast and were about to reach Beligaju's feet. The exorcists around wanted to save him, but it was too late. Brother Zhu. Zhuge Yin's voice became heart-wrenching. Everyone thought that Beligaju was definitely going to die this time. Pity began to show in their eyes. However, Beligaju smiled. Under the brilliance of the torch, he became more and more beautiful and evil at the same time. Just like the red spider lily in full bloom in the demon world. He was indescribably handsome. He raised his head slightly. The lines of his jawbone were like a quiet and secluded bay, so cold and noble that people could not take their eyes off him. The black feathers that symbolized sin, darkness, and greed fell in places where people could not see them. The devil's song was played. Together with his long robe, it slowly fluttered, as if it could embrace the stars in the sky. The wind blew from all directions, fluttering Bailey Jiaju's ink-black hair. He stood there, refusing to be enslaved. He was aloof and indifferent with a hint of evil, filled with a dark aura that humans could not see. He looked at the tide of corpse puppets and narrowed his eyes. His tone was full of warning. His white robe fluttered loudly, shattering all the peace in the cemetery. Get lost. With just one word, all the exorcists saw the most incredible scene. The zombie corpses that were wildly extending their tentacles actually stopped their attack. It was as if they had encountered some kind of obstacle. They began to retreat in all directions, but they did not dare to move toward Bailey Jiaju. The exorcists were stunned. They felt like they were dreaming. How much spiritual power did he have to be able to win without a fight? He did not even have to move, yet he was able to tame all the corpse puppets. It can't be. How is that possible? Did he do anything just now? No, he only said get lost. Zhuge Yin tugged Helian Vivian's sleeve excitedly. Brother Wei, did you see that? Brother Zhu only said get lost. And those corpse puppets seemed to have understood his words. They were so scared that they all ran away. Helian Vivian touched the bridge of her nose. She thought to herself, when we were at the Zonghai waterfall, he only said get lost to the so-called big demon, and it was already so scared. Poor demon, it must still be submerged in the water, not daring to show its head. Helian Vivian had to admit that she understood the demon's feelings very well. However, it did not show its head now, not only because it was scared, but also because it was dressing up. That's right, dressing up. A demon that did not look like a human was looking at itself in a bronze mirror underwater, thinking that it was going to see its king again. The excitement in its heart was absolutely indescribable. As long as its king did not turn it into ashes, it would accept any punishment. The demon nodded at itself in the mirror, sincerely thinking that it was adorable. However, it did not know that the corpse puppets in the graveyard had not even figured out the identity of the man standing in front of them. Their internal organs were already hurting from the pressure of the demon's aura. Aren't they all humans? Why is there a fake one? The corpse puppets ran away in panic, as if they were facing a great enemy. They huddled back in the same way they came out. Their movements were neat, and their steps were standard. They were afraid that if they were too late, they would be crushed by the man's foot. Oh my God, it's too scary. Helian Vivian also felt that His Highness's attack on the demons was so strong that it was almost inhumane. Thinking about it, little Zhuge Yun was already in position. You should at least wait for him to raise his sword and kill a corpse puppet before telling them to get lost. Chapter 749. Before they even started, the other side had already ended. This saying was very suitable for the Ni family. Initially, they were prepared to show off their skills after the zombie had swept past them. Be it the disciples of the Ni family or Ni Biao himself, they did not expect such a shocking scene to happen. Ni who stood on the spot and muttered to himself, "This is impossible. How is this possible?" Even Oldly was dumbfounded. He had lived for more than half of his life, and had raided many tombs, but he had never seen anyone who could make the zombie obediently give way with just the word scram. This was simply amazing. Baligaju did not think much of it, and just strolled toward Hellion Vivian. His slender hands were not stained with any dust, and his sleeves and collar were exquisite and elegant, which set off his tall and straight body vividly. Compared to Baligaju's almost elegant posture, Anaihu's performance just now was not even passable. It was fine if he did not shout, but once he did, the other teams of exorcists all looked at him with obvious mockery in their eyes. Before the zombie had awakened, Anaihu's words were still vivid in his mind. Relying on the fact that his sister was the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, he looked down on everyone. He said things like, "My sister has always been knowledgeable and low-key, unlike some people who only know a little and insist on showing it. I'm afraid they're just talking. When they really encounter something later, who knows how scared they'll be. Take these corpse puppets for example. Some people are probably still having a headache over how to deal with them. And the result? He was the one who only knew how to talk, but he was the one who was scared out of his wits." After this incident, the other exorcists had seen through Anaihu. Basically, no one would believe anything he said anymore, and they all looked at him with disdain. Anaihu opened his mouth and swallowed the words that he wanted to say. He also realized the situation he was in, and an awkward expression appeared on his face. Anai Biao's eyes were extremely gloomy. Obviously, Bailey Jiaju's valiant ability had exceeded his expectations. If they didn't get rid of Zhuge Yun's team now, when they got the Saraira, it would be troublesome as to how to split it. It seemed that he had no choice but to use some tricks. Thinking of this, Anai Biao's eyes flickered. He winked at one of the deputies who was lurking in another team. The deputy immediately understood and nodded slightly. Even so, the Anai family's image was greatly tarnished in front of the exorcists. On the contrary, the Zhuge family's performance had left them speechless. Thinking about it carefully, Zhuge Yin didn't do anything. On the contrary, the two so-called exorcist laymen, one was proficient in ancient tombs, and the other was powerful. The combination of these two people could be called perfect. "Young Master Yin, where did you find this expert? He's too powerful. Is he a bounty exorcist? It should be very expensive, right?" Facing the envious questions of the people, Zhuge Yin was somewhat at a loss for words. He touched his head and felt that it was difficult to answer because until now, other than the names of his two benefactors, he didn't even know where they came from. Baligaju's performance not only attracted the attention of the exorcists, but also attracted Anai Feng's attention. In fact, she had noticed this man long ago. She had seen so many exorcists, but she had never seen one like this person, who was so handsome and powerful that it made her heart flutter. Thinking of this, Anai Feng's face, which was covered by a white veil, could not help but feel a little hot. If she could team up with this man, she would be able to find the Saraira faster. Unfortunately, he was not in the Anai family's team, but it didn't matter, she would spare his life when the time came. As for the others, especially the one who always stood by her side and showed off his knowledge, she would kill all of them who deserved to be killed. All right, now we have to choose one of the four paths. Which one do you think is better? Old Li turned around and asked the exorcists behind him. How would they know? They looked at each other, and there was no consensus on what to say. Zhuge Yin felt that it was safest to ask the person standing beside him for this kind of question, so he lowered his voice and asked, "Brother Wei, which one do you think is better?" "South," Hellion Vivian answered with certainty, and her voice was very soft. Unless it was someone who was very close to them, the other exorcists would not be able to hear it at all. Zhuge Yin was puzzled. Why? Everyone was puzzled. How could she be so sure? Hellion Vivian looked indifferent. There is no why. It's just a general reasoning. The place with the most corpse puppets would definitely be the burial area with the most corpses. Basically, they are all maids and the like. There would not be a main coffin in such a place. Think about it. Which king would be willing to sleep with so many people? The closest coffin to him would at most have one or two corpses, so it would definitely not be the east gate. What about the west and north gates? Why not? After listening to Hellion Vivian's words, Zhuge Yun wanted to know the other answers even more. Hellion Vivian pointed at the place where the people had just died. This is the closest to the West Gate. When we were studying the statue, the West Gate was the only blind spot, so it is very likely that the two disciples of the Ni family ran in this direction after they came back to life. How can a living person walk in a dead person's door? As for why it's not the North Gate, in terms of feng shui, no one would like to face the north after they died. You should know. Zhuge Yun wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Feng shui did mention that the north was ominous, so coffins should not be placed there. However, he had long forgotten about it. Moreover, she could still remember feng shui under such circumstances. He was really impressed. The main thing was that ordinary people would not be able to see the whole picture, and even notice the blind spot. Even he himself wanted to ask, where did he find these two people? Too awesome. Just as Zhuge Yun's blood was boiling, the eldest daughter of the Ni family, who was standing a few steps behind him, suddenly opened her mouth. There was a comforting gentleness in her voice. It's better to go through the south gate. Zhuge Yun was shocked. He turned around abruptly and looked at Ni Feng. Although he did not want to admit it, the eldest daughter of the Ni family was indeed capable. Zhuge Yun thought silently, and was about to express his respect to Ni Feng. Just then he heard elderly ask why. Ni Feng coughed softly a few times, as if she was thinking carefully. Then she said her answer. Because there will be a lot of corpses in a place with a lot of corpse puppets. Chapter 750. A place like this should be a burial place for maids and servants. There would not be a main coffin. No king would be willing to sleep with so many people. There would only be 1 or 2 coffins and corpses closest to him. So it definitely wouldn't be the East Gate. Zhuge Yun listened to Ni Feng's explanation. It was 90% similar to Brother Wei's explanation. At first, he thought it was just a coincidence. In the end, when Ni Feng explained why she did not choose the West Gate, she used the words blind spot. Zhuge Yun's eyes widened in shock. This is clearly what Brother Wei said just now. No matter how young Zhuge Yun was, he was not stupid to the point where he could not see the current situation. Ni Feng knew why the South Gate was a good choice, because she eavesdropped on his conversation with Brother Wei. In other words, she stole Brother Wei's explanation. Zhuge Yun was so angry that his eyes turned red. He wanted to rush forward and confront Ni Feng, but was stopped by Hellion Vivian. Brother Wei, why are you stopping me? Zhuge Yun gritted his teeth in annoyance. You heard what Ni Feng said. She only knew the answer because she eavesdropped on our conversation. Now she thinks that she came up with it herself. She's so shameless. Hellion Vivian calmly said. If you rush out like this, what evidence do you have to prove that she was eavesdropping and not thinking of it herself? Zhuge Yun was stunned. Yes, what evidence do I have? This kind of thing belongs to whoever says it first. The light in Hellion Wei's eyes was very faint, and there was even a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Ni Feng is so unscrupulous because she knows this. Look at everyone's expressions. It's obvious that they already believe in Ni Feng's words. If you argue now, it will make people think that I'm stealing the credit. Zhuge Yun finally noticed that not only the exorcists, but even elderly was looking at Ni Feng with admiration. It was as if they really thought that she was an immortal. This kind of woman is definitely not the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl. Zhuge Yun said angrily. The exorcist that I want to see is definitely not like her. I really want the real Phoenix girl to come here and expose this hypocritical woman. Hellion Vivian coughed softly, reached out and patted him on the shoulder. She smiled meaningfully. Maybe your wish can come true. How is that possible? Zhuge Yun laughed bitterly and glared fiercely at Ni Feng. Ni Feng, on the other hand, was as gentle as ever. It was as if she was the one who came up with those reasons, and it had nothing to do with anyone else. Ni Hu and Ni Biao naturally felt the same way. No matter how powerful the others were, they had the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl in their family. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes as she watched this scene. She began to seriously consider whether she should fulfill Zhuge Yun's wish. Of course. The bigger fetus waved his little hand and said arrogantly, Mother, that woman who impersonated you is too disgusting. Just looking at her will affect my appetite. The smaller fetus opened his eyes weakly and looked at his older brother enviously. His older brother was always full of energy unlike him. He could not help his mother at all. When he got out, he must work harder. The bigger fetus did not know what the smaller fetus was thinking, but he did not forget to take care of him when he moved. Acting like a good older brother, in the graveyard, the large group entered from the south gate. It was a peaceful journey, and they did not encounter any danger. When they reached the second level, Hellion Vivian moved her arm. She felt as if there was something pressing on it. It was so heavy that it was difficult to even lift it up. And Biao felt that this could not go on. If they were all led by his daughter, they would definitely reach the top together in the end. Why should he let others take advantage of this? This was a competition to see who could obtain the Saraira. Since it was a competition, they should follow the rules. Everyone, my friends, please listen to me. Biao put one hand behind his back and said in a dignified manner, now that we have safely entered the second level of the graveyard, according to the rules of the competition, once we reach the graveyard, we can choose a team again. If you choose to follow the Ni family, we will be the winner. If you choose not to follow the Ni family, we can only go our separate ways. Now there are 2 gates in front of you. Let elderly write 2 slips of paper. Whichever gate you grab, you will follow the team you choose. Out of the 4 major factions, only 3 were left, and one of them was empty. The exorcists gradually felt the strain. The 1,000-year-old ancient tomb was not like the outside world, where they only needed to learn how to exorcise. There were too many things that they did not understand. Obviously, if they followed the Ni family, everything would not be a problem anymore. Hence, the Ni family took 27 out of the 36 people in the team. Zhuge Yun and the rest were in the same faction, and did not merge with the Ni family. Surprisingly, the 6 people in the other 2 teams chose to stand behind Hellion Vivian and the rest. Biao sneered at this result. Those who did not choose the Ni family were just sending themselves to their deaths. They would definitely not be able to reach the main coffin. Zhuge Yun, on the other hand, was very excited. When they set off, there were only 3 of them, but now there were 9 of them. The feeling was indescribable. Hellion Vivian and the rest were in the same group. Zhuge Yun was the one who grabbed the slips of paper, and they had to go through the left gate. The 9 of them walked in one after another. They did not encounter anything bad. It was too peaceful along the way. They did not even hear a sound when they walked down. This made them even more worried. After walking for half an hour, there was still no end to the tunnel-like stone path in front of them. Hellion Vivian frowned. She reached out her hand and made a mark on the big stone before continuing to walk. This time was the same as the previous time. Nothing happened. However, Hellion Vivian's expression changed. She stopped and said faintly, "We don't have to walk anymore." "What?" Some of the exorcists asked in confusion. Some of the exorcists understood. "We really don't have to walk anymore. We've been walking in circles." In the beginning it was too peaceful. This calmness made them let down their guard. Coupled with the physical and mental fatigue, they forgot to make a mark. When they saw Hellion Vivian making a mark, they suddenly realized. Their backs were drenched in cold sweat, and they lowered their voices. "We might have encountered a ghost wall." Chapter 751. What? Ghost hitting the wall? Why didn't you say so earlier? The other exorcist shouted. That person said in a hoarse voice. I just realized it too. Keep your voices down. Take out your yellow talismans and turn 3 times on the spot before moving forward. Ghost hitting the wall was not something difficult to deal with. However, the scary part was that if they could not overcome this obstacle, they would be stuck here forever. Even if they walked for a year, they would not be able to make any progress. Fortunately, they were exorcists and knew how to deal with this kind of situation. Everyone quickly opened their bags and prepared to cast their spells. Only then did they realize that the yellow talismans in their bags were all gone. How did this happen? Where are my yellow talismans? Mine is gone too. Look again. Still nothing. Zhuge Yin raised his head. The tip of his nose was dripping with sweat. The situation was very obvious. Someone had done something to them and took away their yellow talismans. Who is it? Why would he do this? Zhuge Yin slammed the ground. Hellion Vivian was not too surprised. Since this is a competition, there will be many underhanded methods. Young Master Yin, you have to get used to this kind of thing. Me. Zhuge Yin had always been calm and had never thought of harming anyone. Although he knew that the competition was not a simple matter, at least no one would be so despicable as to take away all the talismans in the graveyard. This simply meant that they wanted to take their lives. Hellion Vivian looked around and stood up. She patted the dust off her hands. When we set off, there were 9 of us. Now there are only 8 of us left. That person must have sensed that something was wrong and slipped away in advance. It seems like he was prepared. The exorcists vaguely knew who was the culprit. Other than the Ni family, it was the Lin family. There were only these 2 families who did not want the Zhuge family to win. Usually, it was the order of the head of the family who could be so ruthless. If the culprit was the Ni family, then this matter was too terrifying. They trusted Ni Biao so much that they worshipped him. As the exorcist, they wanted to be the most. It can't be the Ni family. The young exorcist bit his thin lips, unwilling to admit his guess. Hellion Vivian glanced at him and said lightly, "It doesn't matter who did it now." That's right. Older exorcists tended to be calmer. Little brother Wei is right. It doesn't matter who did it. The key is how we get out. Without the yellow talismans, they were like exposed pork on the chopping board. If they encountered any problems, they could only be at the mercy of others. In addition, this was not the outside world but the graveyard. No one could predict what they would encounter. The fear of the unknown made everyone feel a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Even their backs were cold. There was no wind in the graveyard, but it gave people the illusion that someone was following behind them. The exorcists did not dare to speak again. After a moment of silence, the oldest exorcist, Xiao Ling, seemed to have heard something. With a faint sobbing tone, he suddenly turned around and asked in confusion, "Why are you crying?" Crying? Hellion Vivian's eyes sharpened. She did not answer. Instead, she waved her long sleeve, and the exorcist's knife glowed in her palm. She was not sure if Xiao Ling had really heard the crying. However, it was better not to speak at this time. Hellion Vivian used to read a book about the supernatural. There was a story in it. The story was about a couple of farmers who returned home late from plowing the fields. The farmer carried his wife, who had trouble walking, on his back. It was difficult to walk at night. The farmer was already very tired, but his wife was crying on his shoulder. The farmer frowned. "Why are you crying all of a sudden?" His wife replied strangely, "I'm not crying." The farmer knew very well that his wife was not a liar, so he suddenly shivered. If his wife said that she was not crying, then she really was not crying. Then who did he hear the crying sound? The farmer did not dare to continue thinking about it. He could only walk forward quickly. When he returned home and his wife asked, he said, "Fortunately, I know what kind of person you are. I also know a little about the rules. I didn't turn around. Otherwise, I'm afraid the 2 of us wouldn't be able to come back." The farmer was right. When walking at night, the most taboo thing to do was to turn around and look. A person only had 3 protective lamps. One was on the left, one was on the right, and one was behind them. Obviously, the lamp behind Xiao Ling had gone out. The crying sound became louder and louder. When Xiao Ling saw that Hellion Vivian was not speaking, he seemed to have understood something. He did not dare to ask any more questions. Cold sweat slid down his forehead. His face was pale. As soon as he raised his eyes, he saw a black shadow standing not far away. His pupils shrank as he asked, What is that?" Hellion Vivian suddenly raised her head and followed his line of sight. She saw a human-like statue standing at the entrance of the cave. It was clearly the same statue that they had seen before. However, what made Xiao Ling feel uneasy was that the eyes of the statue seemed to have moved. It was staring at them gloomily. That kind of indifference with a strange smile made him shudder for no reason. "No, we have to get out of here." Xiao Ling retreated in a panic. It was as if he had encountered a scourge. No matter how others shouted at him, he would only repeat this sentence. However, in the eyes of others, the statue was no different from before. Hellion Vivian looked at Xiaoling's appearance and frowned. She said to Zhuge Yin, "Give me the water bottle." "Okay." Zhuge Yin immediately took the water bottle and handed it over. Hellion Vivian opened the water bottle with her teeth and splashed a wave of cold water on Xiaoling's face. Xiaoling was stunned by the water. Only then did he wake up. There were still water droplets on his face. He looked at Hellion Vivian, who had retracted her hand. He knew that if he did not come back to his senses, he would have run away. If that happened, he would not be able to come back. He immediately cried out, "Thank you." Sob, sob, sob. "Thank you." "It's nothing." Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and patted his shoulder. She knew that he was still a young child. It was probably his first time facing such a situation. She pressed down with her fingers. With the power to calm people down, she said, "Calm down. Don't panic. If someone calls you, don't just say yes." Xiaoling nodded. At that moment, he did not know why, but there was only trust left in his heart. He trusted the person in front of him more than he trusted the Jiang family. He believed that the person in front of him would lead them out of this damned place unscathed. However, the other exorcists did not have much confidence. They pulled their hair irritably and said, "How are we going to leave without the Chinese talisman?" Chapter 752. This was indeed the key problem that they were currently facing. Everyone knew that they needed yellow talismans to break the ghost hits the wall. Without yellow talismans, they could only be trapped here. However, what had just happened to Yiling had already indicated how dangerous it would be to stay in one place. If they didn't leave now, they would be in trouble. Zhuge Yun's heart was also clear. He anxiously looked at Hellion Vivian and asked, "Brother Wei, do you have any ideas?" Hearing this, the other exorcists also subconsciously looked at Hellion Vivian. Even they didn't know that they had unknowingly gained an unprecedented trust in Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian thought for a moment and said, "Let's close our eyes and try walking." Close our eyes and walk. Wouldn't that be more dangerous? The exorcists didn't doubt Hellion Vivian's ability. However, was it really suitable to walk backwards in this situation? Hellion Vivian smiled and said, "In the past, when the officials were robbing tombs, there was a rule. When opening the coffin, one had to enter with their face turned away. When entering the tomb and feeling uncertain about the direction, one had to close their eyes. Ghost hits the wall is a ghost that disrupts a person's judgment through the vibration of their brain magnetic waves. That's why they lose their sense of direction. After all, ghosts are otherworldly items. All of you are exorcists and have spiritual energy in your body. If they want to harm people, they have to use a medium to do so. Using the vibration of their brain waves to create illusions is the most effective way to kill people. For example, Yiling. If we walk with our eyes closed, as humans, we will lose our sense of judgment. Without our sense of judgment, the ghosts won't be able to do anything. Naturally, we will be able to walk out of this predicament." Yiling was stunned. He never thought that evil ghosts would have so many tricks to harm people. What was the vibration of their brain magnetic waves? He didn't understand at all. He only felt that the person in front of him was very powerful. "Brother Wei, you know a lot. Where did you learn all these things?" After seeing all this, the exorcists couldn't help but be amazed. They had been exorcising demons for so many years, but they had never heard of brainwaves. But when they thought about it carefully, evil spirits followed the same pattern of harming people. Hellion Vivian touched the bridge of her nose and smiled silently. She couldn't say that she was more interested in this field in the 21st century and read more movies and novels. "Then let's go now." Yiling was the first to support Hellion Vivian. As a loyal follower of Hellion Vivian, Zhuge Yin had long admired Hellion Vivian. "Don't worry. The graveyard is dangerous after all. Let's make some preparations." There was a hint of a smile in Hellion Weiwei's voice. She looked indolent, as if she would be able to solve any problem in front of her. "This is a cemetery. The yin qi is too strong. We need to expand our yang qi. There are 7 of us in total. To prevent us from getting separated, I will tie a red string around everyone's left wrist." As Hellion Vivian spoke, she took out a red string that was more than 100 meters long from Zhuge Yun's bag. The red string had been soaked in pure young dog blood. Since ancient times, pure young dog blood had been a sacred item to exorcise evil spirits. As long as the head and tail were not cut off, the rest of the people would be able to avoid danger, even if they encountered evil spirits. Zhuge Yin naturally knew about this formation. He didn't expect that the other party would be so adaptable and use such a formation here. However, he said, "Brother Wei, did you count the wrong people? There are clearly 8 of us." When Hellion Vivian heard this, she turned around and looked at Beligaju. His Highness wasn't a human. He couldn't be counted. This formation could only be used by relying on a human's yang energy. Once His Highness entered, the formation would lose its effect. However, she couldn't reveal Beligaju's identity. She was thinking about how to answer Zhuge Yin, who had a righteous expression on his face. Then, she heard Beligaju's clear and noble voice slowly ring in her ears. He spoke very calmly, without the slightest hint of disharmony. "We still need one more person to bring up the rear. I'll bring up the rear. You guys go first." Hearing this, not only Zhuge Yin, but even the other exorcists looked at Beligaju with incomparable gratitude. "Brother Ju, you're really too selfless and too kind. You're actually willing to go to this extent for us." Hellion Vivian was speechless. Selfless and kind? These 2 words didn't quite fit His Highness. Inexplicably, Hellion Vivian thought of the words that His Highness said to the hundreds of officials when they left the capital. She silently withdrew her gaze from His Highness and looked up at the top of the tomb. Only His Highness could buy people's hearts with just a lie. This kind of thing could only be done by His Highness. "Father is pretending again." The bigger fetus snorted coldly. This group of humans actually believed him. Selfless and kind? Haha, does Father even have these 2 things? It's more appropriate to say that he's selfish and ruthless. Stupid exorcists. The smaller fetus did not say anything. He only let out a long sigh in his heart. He continued to suck on his thumb and moved it silently. Big Brother had already scolded the people around him in order to slander Father. Sai, who knew how long this situation would last. Neither the exorcists nor Hellion Vivian could hear the conversation between the 2 little ones. After everyone heard the solution, they began to tie the red string on their hands and closed their eyes. Zhuge Yin was the first to take a step forward, followed by the others. It was very dark in the cemetery, and it was very deep. No one noticed that in the bottomless darkness, a huge black shadow with 8 legs was slowly wriggling. Its pair of demonic red eyes were filled with desire. What a fragrant soul. This smell is simply too wonderful. Oh, a baby that's about to be born. Its flesh must be very tender and delicious. The huge black shadow muttered to itself. Its voice was extremely gloomy as it said to itself, "But that man is indeed a little unfathomable. He actually made a large group of zombies run back. I can't just walk out like this. I must wait until that woman is alone before I slowly disembowel her. Although the waiting process is a little unbearable, it doesn't matter. Soon, I will be able to eat very soon. These humans are not united. I just need to wait." That's right. It only needed to wait a little longer, and they would have nowhere to go. The competition between humans was much scarier than the competition between demons. Especially in this cemetery, the emergence of evil thoughts would only cause this group of people to die faster. So there was no need to rush. The delicious food was about to be delivered to its mouth. Ha ha ha. The black shadow laughed at itself. Bit by bit, it hid itself in the darkness again. Chapter 753. On the other side of the graveyard, the Enai family's army also encountered the Ghost Labyrinth. However, they all had Chinese talismans and were experienced exorcists, so they did not have to spend much effort to settle this matter. However, unlike Hellion Vivian, they did not discover it earlier. Enai Feng only noticed the abnormality when she was on her 3rd lap. After hearing what she said, the others sighed again. They were all talking about how smart Enai Feng was. After hearing this, the smile on Enai Biao's face widened. As long as his daughter was around, these people would always support and trust the Enai family. In that case, whether it was the Saraira or the world, it was destined to belong to him. Just as Enai, who was deep in thought, a figure approached him and said in a low voice, "Master, everything is settled. I've brought their Chinese talismans over. Those people should still be walking around in circles, unable to get out." Well done. Enai Biao's pent-up anger was finally appeased. His eyes were filled with malice. Losing the Chinese talisman in the graveyard meant that they were on the brink of death. Other things aside, they would be at a loss as to what to do with the ghost wall. They could only walk on this path endlessly until they died of exhaustion. They would not be able to reach the end of the path, or they would not know that the things in the graveyard would not wait for them to be tired. They would reach out from the ground and drag them into hell. As soon as he thought of this, Enai Biao could not suppress the smile on his face. One side of his mouth was curled up, while the other side was stiff like a corpse. His face was full of strangeness. He could not see his own expression, but the person standing in front of him was shocked. "Master, you just..." When the exorcist shouted, everyone jumped in fright and looked at them. Enai Biao frowned. "Why are you making such a fuss? Hurry up." The exorcists were stunned, looking at their master who was no different from before. They could not help but shake their heads. Could it be that they were mistaken? "Father, what's wrong?" Enai Feng walked toward Enai Biao. The veil vaguely covered her face, and with the flickering torchlight, no one could see Enai Feng's face clearly. They would only think that she was weak and gentle. Her body was still full of spiritual aura. When she walked past, every exorcist could feel her gentleness. Enai Biao had always been very patient with his beloved daughter. He avoided the topic and said, "Nothing, it's just the people below who don't know the rules and like to make a fuss. Feng you're not in good health, so don't worry about me. Even if it's for us to reach the main coffin sooner, we have to stop, understand?" Enai Biao's words were not for Enai Feng, but for the other exorcists. He wanted them to know that it was all because of his beloved daughter that they were able to get to where they were today. When Enai Feng heard him, she immediately coughed a few times and shook her hand. Her voice was soft and tired. "Cough, father, I'm fine. It's not safe in the cemetery. We should reach the main coffin as soon as possible. You're too considerate of the world." Enai Biao looked at Enai Feng kindly, his eyes full of sympathy. When Enai Feng spoke, even her breath was a little out of breath. "As the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, this is what I should do." When the crowd saw this, they naturally worshipped the Enai family even more. Even the suspicion that they had just raised was dispelled. They could only praise Enai Feng for having a bodhisattva's heart. No one noticed that when Enai Feng lowered her head, her thin lips seemed to be moving, as if she was chewing something. At that moment, Enai Biao also felt a little tired. The sudden sleepiness made him shake his head. "Master," the exorcist sent by Enai Biao was still looking at him. Seeing that his eyes were a little dazed, he asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" Enai Biao came back to his senses and was a little more awake. "I'm fine. But why did you shout so loudly just now? Was there something on my face?" The exorcist hesitated for a moment and immediately shook his head. "No, I saw wrongly." He couldn't possibly say that the master looked like he was possessed at that moment. That was completely impossible. The master's exorcism magic was the most powerful in Exorcist City. No ghost could get close to him. The exorcist thought that he must have been hallucinating. After all, it was easy to see wrongly after going around in circles. However, no matter how he comforted himself, there was always a voice in his heart asking himself, was such a realistic scene really an illusion? We've reached the exit. Looking at the faint light in front, someone shouted. Oldly glanced at him and signaled the man to lower his voice. He then took the lead and walked out of the tunnel-like cave. He raised the torch in his hand and lit up all the oil lamps on the ground. A loud boom was heard. The entire cemetery lit up, and the huge mural came into view in an instant. It was as if they had entered a gorgeous palace. There were gold, silver, and jewels everywhere, decorating the stone walls. It was indescribably majestic. Perhaps it was the human nature to be attracted to wealth. When the exorcists saw so many shiny jewels, they couldn't help but want to move forward. Don't move. Elderly suddenly stopped them and pointed to the top of their heads. Look, what's that? The exorcists followed Old Lee's finger and looked up. They wouldn't have known if they didn't look. But when they saw it, their scalps went numb. The things hanging on the ceiling were not decorations, but corpses one after another. The scariest thing was, Guazi and filial son, who came in with them and died at the entrance of the tomb, were also on the ceiling. Everyone's eyes revealed an indescribable fear at that moment. Why were they here? How did they come here? Zombies? But what kind of person would hang themselves on the beam of a house? Moreover, their postures were particularly strange. It was as if they were puppets controlled by something. Their limbs and joints were hanging unnaturally, but they were swaying back and forth on the ceiling. Their eyes were fixed on them, and there was a strange smile on their faces. It was as if they would wake up at any moment and pounce on them. The most shocking thing was that all the exorcists were thinking, how did these two people get up there? On the way here, they didn't encounter these two people. Even if they were zombies, they should at least see the corpses, right? Their speed was already fast enough. At the very least, they were more agile than the dead corpses. Everyone knew that the corpses that had just died, even if they could stand up and walk, would be very, very slow. Even if they walked, they would be left behind. But the current situation was that these two people had actually walked in front of them. Chapter 754. The mystery had left a terrifying shadow in everyone's heart. The disciples of the Inai family, who wanted to run to the jewel, were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. They dared not take another step forward. However, they had to pass through this place if they wanted to go deeper into the graveyard. Enai Biao's face darkened. He turned around to look at Enai Feng, wanting to know if she had any ideas. The rest of the exorcists also looked at Enai Feng. After all, the eldest daughter of the Enai family had surprised them when she chose the door last time. They believed that she would have a solution this time as well. Little did they know that the reason why Enai Feng mentioned the South Gate option last time was because she had eavesdropped on Hellion Vivian. This time, Enai Feng did not have any reference at all. Naturally, she would not be able to figure it out. The longer his gaze lingered on her, the more uncomfortable Enai Feng felt. She had never been so embarrassed before. Something seemed to be leaking out of her eyes, but she suppressed it very well and did not say a word. Seeing this, Enai quickly jumped out to help his family out of the situation. Don't look at my elder sister like that. She will feel burdened and will not be able to think of anything. Moreover, my elder sister has been thinking of ideas all this while. Her body will not be able to take it. As he spoke, Enai glanced sideways at Enai Feng. Big sister, are you feeling unwell again? Do you want to rest for a while? Enai Feng knew that using her weak body was the best way to deal with this situation. She pressed her fingers on her forehead and softly hummed in acknowledgement. Enai immediately ordered someone to let Enai Feng take a seat. He then said to the exorcists, let my elder sister rest for a while. This matter seems fishy. My elder sister has to think about it before she knows if there's a way to solve it. Hearing this, the exorcists remembered Enai Feng's hard work and immediately said, Miss Ni's health is the most important thing. Everything else can be put aside for now. That's right. Your health is the most important thing. Let's all rest here. The exorcists were about to sit down. Just then, they saw a person slowly walking out from where they had just walked in. It was Zhuge Yun. His hands were outstretched as if he was moving forward in the dark. There was even a piece of cloth over his eyes. Not only him, but even the people behind him were the same. Brother Yin, what are you doing? The exorcists were no longer the same as before. Now, everyone was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. They were on guard against anything abnormal. When Enai Biao heard the two words Brother Yin, it was as if he was suddenly electrified. He quickly turned around and looked behind him. He looked at the 8 people walking out, as if he was looking at a ghost. How was this possible? How could they possibly be alive? The hidden exorcist standing in the distance did not expect to see Hellion Vivian and the rest again. In his mind, this group of people should have been trapped in the infinite loop long ago. How could they have followed behind them and reached the second level? What was going on? Didn't you say that you took away all their yellow talismans? How could they still be alive and well, and even make it here? Enai Biao questioned his subordinate with his eyes. The exorcist could not face such a question. The image of him seeing Enai Biao just now appeared in his mind again. He was at a loss as if he had lost his soul. He did not know how this group of people came out. The other party's yellow talismans were still in his bag. There was no reason for them to be safe and sound. In order to sneak in better, he even put on a little disguise, deliberately reducing his presence. Using his advantage, he took advantage of when they weren't paying attention to him, and looted all the bags. He did not search except for the two outsiders who did not carry any bags. However, he was sure that the other two did not carry any yellow talismans. The exorcist panicked. In order not to expose his identity, he could not shake his head at Enai Biao. He could only signal with his eyes. At this time, Zhuge Yun heard the noise, and immediately pulled down the cloth covering his eyes. His youthful face revealed a relieved smile. "We really made it out. Brother Wei, we really made it out." At this time, Hellion Vivian had also removed the black cloth covering her eyes. She did it even earlier than Zhuge Yun. It was not because she heard the sound, but because she felt the faint light. She knew that the exit was not far away. Humans had infinite possibilities. As long as they were trained, they could actually sense light sources even with their eyes closed. The exorcist was even more confused after hearing Zhuge Yun's words. "What do you mean by you really made it out? Brother Yun, Xiaoling, why are both of you wearing a cloth covering your faces?" Before Zhuge Yun could say anything, Yiling jumped up excitedly. "It was Brother Wei who told us to guess. After we entered the cave, we encountered a wall of ghosts. We didn't know who took the Chinese talismans from us, so..." "What did you say? The yellow talismans on you were taken away. Then how did you make it out?" When the exorcists heard this, they interrupted Xiao Ling in surprise, before he could finish his sentence. Xiao Ling pointed at Hellion Vivian. "It was Brother Wei. He thought of a special method. He made us cover our eyes and keep walking forward." Cover our eyes and keep walking forward? The exorcists had never heard of this method before. They could not help but laugh suspiciously. Anaihu glanced at them with disdain and said, "You think you can walk out like this? Who are you trying to fool?" Xiaoling was still young. When he was laughed at, his face turned red. However, he was extremely determined. "When you saw us just now, we came out with our eyes covered. Furthermore, each of us had a dog's blood-red rope tied around our hands to prevent yin energy from entering our bodies. This was all Brother Wei's idea." The exorcists were stunned by his words. Yes, they had seen these people walk out blindfolded with their own eyes. At first, they thought that something had happened. Now that they thought about it carefully, everyone could not help but be shocked. If this was true, then the other party was too powerful. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to get out of the ghost wall without yellow talismans. However, this guy with the surname Wei was able to come out of such a desperate situation. The exorcists were once again in an uproar. Anaihu obviously did not believe it. He mocked. "Then tell us, how did you manage to get out of the ghost wall with your eyes covered? This is completely baseless." So what if they managed to get out? They would not be able to explain it. It was just a blind cat running into a dead mouse. How dare they show off in front of the Anai family? He would like to see how they were going to smooth things over. Chapter 755. Anaihu was sure that they were spouting nonsense. However, at this moment, Hellion Weiwei smiled and walked toward him. Her eyes were cold as she said, "To be honest, I hate to explain to retards. However, since young master and I has asked, then I will tell you why you can walk out of the ghost labyrinth with your eyes closed. It's actually a very simple reason that all exorcists know. Ghosts are otherworldly items. If you want to harm someone, you have to come up with some ideas. Some can create dreams, some can create illusions, and the ghost labyrinth is a classic example of a positional illusion. As long as you close your eyes, you won't be able to take advantage of this illusion. After all, ghosts also have intelligence, unlike young master and I, who can't think about anything." Anaihu was so angry that his fingers were trembling. This person was clearly implying that he was stupid. Hellion Vivian looked at him with a smile and raised her eyebrows. "I've explained it so clearly, Young master and I, don't tell me that you don't understand? Hearing this, all the exorcists understood what Hellion Vivian meant. They looked at Anaihu and burst into laughter. Anaihu's face turned red and white from the laughter, but he could not find any words to refute. This was because the moment Hellion Vivian finished speaking, Elderly shouted, "Good!" Everyone turned their heads and looked at him. Elderly smiled. "This old man is really excited. We have a rule in the Ghost Labyrinth. When we enter the cemetery and come across a path that we can't walk out of, we have to walk with our eyes closed. When we open the coffin, we have to walk with our faces turned away. Until now, this old man still doesn't understand why we have to pay attention to this. Now that I've heard young Master Wei's words, it's as if I've been struck by lightning. This old man doesn't understand exorcism spells, but young Master Wei's method can be used when ordinary people are in danger in the future. It's really excellent." Zhuge Yun did not understand why Brother Wei did not mention the brainwaves, but he had to admit that compared to the first explanation he heard from Brother Wei, this explanation was much easier to understand. After hearing Hellion Wei's words, the other exorcists seemed to have been bewitched. After so many years of exorcism, they had always relied on Dao techniques, and had never thought about such things. Now that he was reminded by Hellion Vivian, his eyes lit up. The admiration that surged from the bottom of his heart could not be concealed at all. "Little Brother Wei, I old son, have never admired anyone. You are the first." "Me too, I'm impressed. Brother Wei, how did you think of this? How are you so smart? And young Master Yin, you're so calm at such a young age." The more Anaihu listened, the more annoyed he became. In the past, this kind of praise was only given to the Anai family. Since when was it the other people's turn? In fact, the other people included Zhuge Yun. Anai Biao was also in a bad mood. He had never expected that the other party would be able to think of a way to escape without a Chinese talisman. It seemed that his technique was still too gentle. He should have waited until there was no one else, then found a place to push them down and bury them alive. Anaihu, who was the closest to Anai Biao, did feel that his father was different from before. However, he did not care as he did not want to continue listening to these praises. He looked around and fixed his gaze on Anai Feng. Without thinking, he changed the topic and pretended to be polite. "Fellow cultivators, can you keep your voices down? My sister is still thinking about the corpses hanging on the roof, and how we can safely enter the first floor. This kind of noise will inevitably affect her thoughts." "It's okay, I cough, I'm fine." Anai Feng coughed as she spoke. She seemed to be exhausted and her eyebrows furrowed. "But to think about these problems, we do need some silence." When everyone heard this, they immediately stopped talking. Ever since Xiao Ling came out safely, he had an unspeakable suspicion towards the Anai family. He turned around and asked, "What do you need silence to think about?" The exorcists were silent for a moment. Then, they pulled him aside and pointed at the corpses hanging on the roof for him to see. Xiao Ling's face immediately turned pale, without a trace of blood. What is going on?" Guozi and the others, everyone had the same question. Everyone was guessing. The graveyard fell into a dead silence. No one noticed that Hellion Vivian was looking at the white light that flashed across the corpses. She lowered her eyes as if she was thinking about something. "Brother Wei." Zhuge Yun began to stop asking questions. Instead, he asked excitedly, "Do you have a solution?" Hellion Vivian smiled faintly but did not say anything. Then, Anaihu said indifferently, "Brother Yin, do you think that others can figure out a problem that even my sister has not figured out?" Initially, Hellion Vivian did not intend to say anything. She only wanted to walk over and take all the jewelry. After all, in her eyes, the temptation of money was only comparable to His Highness. Regardless of whether it was Anaihu or Anai Feng, they had to stand aside. However, some people just had to stop her from making money. This made Hellion Wei slightly unhappy. She turned her head and lazily raised her lower lip. The principle behind this is the same as choosing a door. Eldest young lady Anai unexpectedly couldn't figure it out. "It's really interesting." Anai Feng did not say anything. She only smiled gently, but her hands that were hidden under her long sleeves were clenched. Anaihu did not know the reason behind this. He sneered. What do you mean the principle behind this is the same as choosing a door? Brother Wei, did you make a mistake? The one who chose the right door was my sister, not you. Don't speak as if you know everything. That's right. Now that I've heard what young master and I said, who was the one who chose the right door? Hellion Vivian kept the dog blood red string in her hand. Then let's analyze it properly. Young master and I, don't you think that I can't figure out these things? Then listen carefully. And I who did not take it seriously, because even he did not know that an iPhone was actually borrowing Hellion Vivian's influence. He only sneered. Brother Wei, I know that you're eloquent. However, if you want to steal other people's credit with your eloquence, my and I family will not allow it. This time, Hellion Wei ignored him. Instead, she stretched out her slender fingers and lazily pointed at the two corpses on top of her head. Her voice was very calm. I think everyone is like me. When you see this scene, the first question that comes to your mind is, why did these two people, who are clearly dead, arrive here faster than us, and even appear in front of us in an inconceivable posture? Chapter 756. What's so strange about that? Isn't it just a moving corpse? And I who said disdainfully. Hellion Vivian laughed. Moving corpse? Young master and I, have you ever seen a moving corpse walk faster than a living person? I believe that all the other exorcists know about this. Indeed, the others knew about it. That was why they were even more puzzled. As for an I who, the exorcists glanced at him. It was time to mock him. An I who also knew that he had made a fool of himself. He stammered, so what? Don't forget that the two of them disappeared before we left. Young master and I seems to remember this kind of thing very clearly. However, I would like to ask young master and I, how fast did they have to be able to hang themselves on the roof? And in such a position? Hellion Wei looked back absent-mindedly. And I who was speechless. The others looked at him, and gradually lost their patience. Young master and I, since you don't know anything, can you not interrupt when Brother Wei is talking? Yuling's words stirred up a wave among the exorcists. Everyone was dissatisfied with an I who's behavior. Their eyes were filled with condemnation. No matter how unwilling an I who was, he could only shut his mouth and turn his head away. He would return this humiliation sooner or later. An I who was jealous, but an iPhone was smart. After listening to Hellion Vivian's words, she suddenly grasped something in her mind. She laughed softly and coughed softly. Actually, I have thought about what young Master Wei said a long time ago. I just didn't know how to say it. When Zhuge Yun heard this, he immediately exploded. His eyes widened and his usually calm face changed. How could this person be so shameless? The first time he eavesdropped on Brother Wei's words, he thought it was his own idea. This time he used the same trick. In fact, he was even more shameless than the last time. He went from the dark side to the bright side, and said that he had long thought of what Brother Wei had said. A person like you doesn't deserve to be the Phoenix Maiden. Zhuge Yun couldn't hold it in anymore and blurted out. You know very well that if you didn't eavesdrop on my conversation with Brother Wei last time, we wouldn't even know which door to enter the tomb. Why is it that before Brother Wei spoke, you said that you needed to calm down to think things through? But after Brother Wei spoke, you said that you had already thought of it. Lady Ni's way of thinking is really unique. Faced with such a question, the graveyard fell into silence. The exorcists were obviously shocked. They never thought that there would be such a mystery behind the selection of a door. Discussions broke out like a tidal wave. If what Zhuge Yun said is true, then isn't Lady and I always stealing other people's things? It can't be. Young Lady and I would never do something so immoral. Is there some misunderstanding? I also think it's impossible. If it wasn't for young Lady and I, we would have been buried alive in this tomb. Young Lady Ni's body has always been weak. If it wasn't to reduce our danger, she wouldn't have to rush at all. Anai Biao listened to the discussions around him, and knew that most people were on the Anai family's side. He took advantage of the situation and sighed. My eldest daughter is good at many things, but she's too kind. She only thought about how to get everyone to the main coffin as soon as possible, and didn't think about other things. Now that you've misunderstood, my dear nephew. As he spoke, he looked at Zhuge Yun. My dear nephew, I know that all these years, you have a grudge against me and the Ni family. After all, we used to be two equal families. After brother Zhuge passed away, the Zhuge family was declining day by day. But the Ni family's reputation was getting better and better. Uncle also wants the Zhuge family to do well. But nephew Zhuge is a person. It's fine for him to constantly strive for self-improvement, but he can't rely on others to climb up. Feng Er's hard work has been witnessed by all of you. You jumped out and said that my Feng Er, do you have any evidence? Hearing this, the exorcists also asked. That's right, young Master Yin. What evidence do you have to say that about Miss Feng? Zhuge Yin was, after all, young and hot-blooded. He simply could not hold back his straightforward nature. Being questioned like this and unable to produce any substantial evidence, he was so vexed that he wanted to knock on his own head. Ni Feng looked at him from the beginning to the end, as if she already knew that he couldn't produce any evidence. That was why she didn't take them seriously, relying on her family background and her identity as the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl. She was so unscrupulous. She had gone too far. Zhuge Yin was so angry that his eyes turned red. He growled. Since Uncle and I asked, then please tell us what Sister and I had thought through. Why was it inconvenient for her to say it just now? Now that Brother Wei has said it, it's convenient for her to say it. Hellion Vivian's eyes didn't change. Even her expression didn't change. When she heard Zhuge Yun's words, she sighed in her heart. What a silly child. When others set a trap, he would jump right into it. However, when she thought about it, he was just fighting for justice for her. Hellion Vivian didn't say much. She tapped her fingers on the side of her body and pondered indifferently. Zhuge Yin thought that Ni Feng, an imposter, couldn't possibly know what Brother Wei was going to say. However, he didn't expect Ni Feng to continue his words. She coughed softly as if she was wronged, but was holding it in. Her voice was very gentle. It's no wonder that Brother Yin misunderstood me. I didn't want to talk about this at first, because I didn't want to ruin the relationship between the families. However, it has come to a point where I have no choice but to say it. Just as young Master Wei mentioned earlier, even if the corpses were tainted by the yin qi and stood up, they would walk extremely slowly. It's impossible for them to walk in front of us. And it's even more impossible for them to appear on the roof with such a strange posture so quickly. This is because they didn't come here by themselves, they were carried here. When Ni Feng finished her last sentence, she was stunned. All the exorcists widened their eyes. Even Zhuge Yin was stunned. He subconsciously looked at Hellion Vivian and saw that she didn't object. His heart quickly sank. He suddenly understood that Ni Feng really didn't know anything at the beginning. However, after listening to Brother Wei's words, she was able to quickly connect the dots. This woman was indeed smart. Not only was she smart, but she was also vicious. She allowed him to make a fuss just to smear his and Brother Wei's reputation. Chapter 757. If she was right about the reason, regardless of whether she was the one who came up with it or not, all the credit would be hers. In the end, the incompetent ones would be him and Brother Wei, not this woman. Shameless. This is too shameless. Zhuge Yun clenched his fists and stared at Ni Feng. He hated the woman in front of him, and hated himself for being so impatient. However, if he did not speak up at that time, all the credit would go to Ni Feng again. He was unwilling. Could he just let this woman steal the fruits of Brother Wei's labor? In the end, the thief would gain fame and love. However, the person who created the credit would be framed and discredited. Zhuge Yin only felt a lump in his throat, and a sour feeling welled up in his heart. What a fucking grievance. Ni Feng looked at Zhuge Yun's expression, and her voice became softer, as if she had finally proven her innocence. Her tone was filled with pity. The reason why I didn't say this was because I was worried that everyone would be dissatisfied after hearing it. After all, it was indeed worrying that there was a spy among us. I didn't expect Brother Yin to misunderstand. After hearing Lady Ni's words, now that I think about it, it is indeed so. To be able to make these two people appear here with us, in such a strange position on the roof of the palace, someone must have done something. The exorcists fell silent and looked at each other. They had already determined that Enai Feng's words were the answer. Finally, their eyes fell on Zhuge Yin. Young Master Yin, you have indeed misunderstood Miss Enai this time. In the future, you should think carefully before you say anything. As an exorcist, we all respect your father's work. Don't let the 100 years of honor that he has created for the Zhuge clan be ruined by your hands. These words were extremely serious. In ancient times, the most important thing for a clan was its reputation, let alone the exorcist clan. Zhuge Yin had been working hard since he was young. He did not want to fall behind, because he did not want to let his father down. However, now, Zhuge Yin clenched his fists tighter, but there was nothing he could do. Although Yiling wanted to help, he didn't have the strength to do so. This was because they already knew that there was a spy in the team when they encountered the ghost wall. This proved that Miss Ni's analysis was correct. Guozi and the others were dragged here by a spy. Enai, whose face was full of pride. He knew that as long as his sister was here, Zhuge Yin and the two outsiders could only play with them. Did they think that they could win against his sister with some tricks? He couldn't be any more naive. This time it's all over. Enai, who was undoubtedly the most delighted one. Enai Biao also felt that he had vented his anger, and was about to say something. Just as he was about to say something, a clear voice sounded from the side again. There is indeed a spy, but the reason why Guozi and the rest are here is not because of a spy. Miss Enai, it seems that you really don't know why I didn't choose the East Gate. It was Hellion Vivian. Her lips curled into a smile. It was so bright that it made people feel a sense of sharpness breaking out of the ground. Since you didn't hear everything when you were eavesdropping, I can tell you now why you couldn't choose the East Gate. It's because there's something hidden there. That thing is not a spy, but a creature that lives in ancient tombs such as corpse puppets. Of course, it's not a corpse puppet. As for what it is, I can tell you later. Now it's my turn to ask Miss Enai. When we entered the tomb, there were a total of 33 people, excluding Guozi and the other person who died. At that time, those 33 people were still in everyone's line of sight and could testify for each other. If it was really a spy, it would take time for him to drag people here. May I ask, how did he carry Guozi and the other person's bodies here in front of everyone without being discovered? Enai Feng was stunned by Hellion Vivian's question. She did not say anything. Her face was hidden behind the white veil, so no one could see her expression. She just slowly clenched her fingers. Enai, who spoke at this time. Brother Wei, are you really smart or just pretending to be smart? If you want to avoid our eyes, you could have just walked through another gate. Why would you ask my sister such a stupid question? It seems that you're really at your wit's end. That's why you came up with something stupid like, this is actually caused by another creature in the tomb. To deceive everyone. I didn't expect young Master and I to be enlightened, Hellion Vivian said to Enai, who with a faint smile. Her thin lips curved into a mocking smile. Enai, whose face darkened. What do you mean? Nothing. I just agree with what young Master and I said. Hellion Vivian spoke very slowly with a lazy tone. Young Master and I also said that if we want to avoid everyone's eyes, we have to walk through another gate. Do you still remember that after we passed through the south gate, we came across two entrances on the left and right? At that time, Master and I asked us to regroup. He said that only those who were loyal to the Enai family would be brought along with him. Those who were not loyal to him would have to be split into groups. Okay, here's the main point. How many people were there at that time? 33 people. That's right, no more, no less, a total of 33 people. In other words, there were no fewer people who walked through the south gate with us. Since everyone walked through the south gate, where did the spy come from? Enai, who was dumbfounded by Hellion Wei's precise and meticulous repetition of the numbers in her memory. He stood there like a fool. His eyes were wide open, and he couldn't utter a single word. The others gasped in shock when they heard Hellion Vivian's last sentence. The truth was laid out in front of them. Every number was extremely convincing. They had no choice but to believe that young Master Wei was right. The exorcists were reminded by Hellion Vivian. They instantly thought of something. Once again, the earth-shattering sounds of discussion rang out. That's right. When we were splitting into groups, everyone was present. It's impossible for anyone to walk through another gate. In other words, the corpses of Guazi and the others were not moved by a spy. Of course not. Didn't you hear what Brother Wei said? It's not a spy who did this. There's something in this tomb that we don't know about. God, if that's the case, young master and I. Chapter 758. Everyone turned to look at an iPhone. At this point, it was clear that the one at fault was the young lady of the Ni family, not Brother Wei. iPhone clenched her fists so tightly that her hands, which were hidden under her long sleeves, were sinking into her palms. Ni, who could no longer be arrogant, and even his body shrunk back. He did not believe that anyone could win against his elder sister. Hellion Vivian, on the other hand, remained calm. Now, let's talk about the creature that moved the corpses of Guazi and the others here. After everyone came in, all of our attention was on Guazi and the others, because the fact that they were able to walk in front of us was too unbelievable. This took up most of everyone's attention, causing everyone to overlook a very fatal problem, and that was the corpses themselves. After a person dies, the corpse will reflect a lot of information. For example, right now, all of the corpses were suspended in a very strange posture. Their limbs seemed to have been dissected and hung unnaturally, making them look like puppets that were being manipulated with countless strings behind them. In fact, this was not an illusion, but the corpses were indeed being manipulated. However, that thing didn't rely on strings to control these corpses. There was a type of string that was even stronger than the strings used by humans. Not only that, it also had a sticky substance that could quickly capture its prey and bind it tightly. This kind of silk is usually not easy to find, as it has a good concealment ability. It will only reflect a silver light when it shines on it. As she spoke, Hellion Vivian raised the torch in her hand and tried to shine it on the nearest corpse. Everyone widened their eyes to look, only to see a thin silver wire flash past the corpse's knee. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to see it at all. What was that? Hellion Vivian looked at an iPhone. Guazi and the others' corpses did indeed disappear at the east gate, but just by relying on the blind spot, they would not have disappeared so quickly that no one had a chance to react. It was just a turn of the head, and when they turned around again, the two corpses were already gone. Such a fast speed is not normal at all. All living things, regardless of whether they were humans or other things, would leave behind traces as long as they passed through a place. However, there were no traces at the east gate at that time. This had always bothered me. What kind of thing could take away those two corpses without showing up? I couldn't figure it out at that time, so I didn't choose the east gate. In fact, according to Feng Shui, that gate was the closest to the main coffin. Hee. Didn't Miss and I have a lot of thoughts when she was choosing the door? Then, can you tell everyone why the east door is the closest to the main coffin? An iPhone was completely frozen. She could not utter a single word. Both of them were well aware that even her previous choice was based on the other person's thoughts. Why was the east gate closest to the main coffin? How could she possibly know? An iFang's clenched fingers tightened. If it could be said that people's eyes were only filled with suspicion at the beginning, they were now filled with shock. The eldest daughter of the Ni family was really plagiarizing from beginning to end. Sister? Ni, who was so anxious that his face was sweating. He turned around and sneered at Hellion Vivian. Brother Wei, if there's anything you want to say, just say it. Don't keep asking my sister this and that. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curved into a half smile. The reason is very simple. It's because the west gate with the most corpse puppets is where the servants are buried. The tomb was originally built from west to east along the dragon vein. Under normal circumstances, experienced masters would consider this point when building an ancient tomb. They would place the main coffin in the deepest part of the tomb, which is the furthest away from the buried person. This is to show the master's supreme status. I believe that Elderly knows this better than I do. Hellion Vivian looked at Elderly as she said this. Elderly nodded approvingly and said, Brother Wei is right. No matter if it's the nobles or the bureaucrats, when the masters are building a tomb, they would usually use this method to prevent future generations from disturbing them. They would let the servants stand in front of them to block the entrance. This way, they would be able to block a lot of people. Most of the tomb robbers would be misled by the coffins and mechanisms in front of them, and die before they could reach the main coffin. This time, the entrance to the tomb that we entered was left behind by someone who was searching for the dragon cave. We only encountered 4 doors when we were halfway through the tomb. Hellion Vivian smiled and continued. Therefore, the main coffin would definitely be placed in the opposite direction of the west gate, the east gate. This gate is also the closest to the main coffin. When the exorcists heard this, they were all a little dumbfounded. They had never considered the problem of the direction of the tomb. Although it was shown from the competition data at the beginning, no one would care about such trivial matters. However, this person with the surname Wei was actually so meticulous. He could deduce the exact location of the main coffin with just a few clues. This kind of strategy was truly admirable. Hellion Wei did not let go of her gaze. She continued to stare at an iPhone with a faint smile. I think Miss and I must be very confused about why I didn't say that she was a spy, but instead, led her to think that she was a spy from the start. The reason is simple. I just wanted to see if someone would try to steal my idea again like the last time. Sure enough, Miss and I opened her mouth very quickly, even faster than I thought. It seems that reputation is really very attractive to Miss and I. As Hellion Vivian's last sentence ended, and Feng's back trembled heavily. It turned out that this person did it on purpose from the beginning. He deliberately left his words unfinished, so that he could lure her into his trap. When Zhuge Yun scolded her just now, she thought that he had fallen into her trap. Although this person with the surname, Wei only said the first half of his sentence, she was very clear in her heart that he wanted to say the word spy. And Feng was confident that she would not make a mistake, which was why she dared to do so. Even if Zhuge Yun jumped out, she was not afraid. The reason was simple. This kind of reasoning was supposed to be based on who said it first. Zhuge Yun's ruckus would only make their group more unbearable. However, she did not expect that this person had already set her up from the beginning. It was fine if she did not speak. Once she spoke, it meant that she had already fallen into this person's trap. If she had restrained herself when Zhuge Yun was speaking, she could have saved the situation. At least, she would not have been involved in the previous incident. However, at that time, she thought that the person who had fallen into the trap was him. No, it was not what she thought. It was this person who did not stop her at that time on purpose, giving her the illusion that she had already won. Chapter 759. In fact, that was the beginning of the game for the other party. The more her father and brother slandered Zhuge Yun, the better. At that time, the Ni family's reputation would be slapped even harder. This Wei fella wanted to skin her alive. She and the Ni family would not even have a way to disguise themselves. What a ruthless method. Feng was a smart person. It was not difficult for her to understand Hellion Vivian's words. Biao had always been astute. As soon as Hellion Vivian said those words, he knew that they had fallen into the other party's trap. For so many years, they had never been forced to this extent. Even his beloved daughter was dragged into this mess. Biao felt his face hurt, but he could not resist the crowd's criticism. So it's for the sake of reputation. This is really... Someone shook his head with a face full of disappointment. It's too unbecoming of the Phoenix girl. She took someone else's idea as her own. This is not something that the exorcising tribe would do. The voices of the crusade were getting louder. Although they were much quieter, everyone could hear them clearly. Zhuge Yun took a deep breath. His originally sour mood had turned into the agitation in the deepest part of his blood. He had almost given up on defending himself. This was because he knew that no matter what he said, he could not compare to the Ni family's influence. Moreover, the person who took away someone else's credit was the Lady Ni who was known as the Phoenix Girl. His heart started to turn cold. However, that person had once again created a miracle. Zhuge Yun excitedly looked at Hellion Vivian. He had decided. The Phoenix Girl was too far away from him. He might not be able to see the exorcist that he admired the most in his life. However, Brother Wei was different. Brother Wei was standing right in front of him. Brother Wei would be his goal in the future. The young man's thoughts turned quickly. His eyes were shining brightly. Hellion Vivian looked at him and felt an inexplicable pressure. In fact, if it was not because of Zhuge Yun's unspoken wish, she would not care about what an iPhone did. Her purpose in entering the ancient tomb was simple. It was to find the Saraira to eliminate the evil in her baby. However, some people were always insatiable. It was one thing to impersonate him, but to impersonate him in such a shameless manner. Hellion Wei let out a mocking laugh as she watched the exorcists in the graveyard attack the Ni family coldly. Elder Li, who had been saved by Phoenix Girl before, couldn't bear to see such a scene. He bent his back and stood up. There must be some misunderstanding here. Little brother Wei, this old man knows Phoenix Girl's character the best. If she hadn't appeared in this old man's dream, the entire village would have died. Such a kind-hearted person wouldn't steal other people's credit. Seeing that Elder Li was on their side, Anai immediately said, Elder Li is right. There must be some misunderstanding. Take Brother Wei for example. From the beginning to the end, you kept talking bad about my sister, and even thought of a trap for my sister to fall into. However, you never clearly told everyone what that unknown creature you were talking about was. I've never heard of anything that can drag someone away without showing its face. Don't tell me that even you don't know what it is? That's why you kept tangling with the matter of choosing the door, so that everyone couldn't focus. You were afraid that everyone would question you again in the next episode. The reason why Anai made such a guess was because Hellion Vivian said that she didn't think it through at that time. Since she didn't think it through at that time, it was impossible for her to think it through now. After all, it had only been a short 2 hours. Anai continued, that was a close call. If it wasn't for Senior Li's words, my sister would have become your shield to fool everyone. It's just a small thing on the corpse, not some gold or silver. You've been exaggerating. You said that this is a kind of silk that's more reliable than the thread used by humans, and that it can quickly capture prey and bind them tightly. Hehe. Is there such a thread? Why haven't I heard of it before? After saying that, Anai sneered and turned his face away. Hellion Vivian's voice lightly interrupted his arrogance. With young Master Ni's intelligence, it's not strange that you haven't heard of it before. You. Anai was so angry that the veins on his forehead were popping out. His hands instantly clenched into iron fists. Hellion Vivian walked towards Anai with unprecedented coldness in her eyes. First of all, the one who did wrong is your Anai family. It was your sister who carried out a shameless theft and took other people's things as her own. This isn't a matter of being a shield. Secondly, there are some things that you haven't heard of, but it doesn't mean that everyone is as ignorant as your Anai family. TSK, you're talking nonsense again. Don't think that you can attack us like this. Spider Silk. Before Anai could finish his sentence, Hellion Wei calmly interrupted him. No matter how stupid young Master Anai is, you should know the characteristics of the spider's silk. It's sticky and tough at the same time. Once a prey falls into it, it will be trapped to death. Although there are no obvious traces of a web here, the silver silk that flashed past the corpses is real. How did it become a good thing that isn't worth mentioning in your eyes? Anai felt like he was punched in the face. He didn't expect that the other party could find a type of silk that matched his description. Spider silk. He actually made a fool of himself in front of others because of something that was commonly seen. Hellion Wei looked at him with a mocking smile. Moreover, if the initiator was a spider, it could have stayed in the east gate and not shown itself. All it needed to do was to use the spider silk to entangle Guizi and the others and quickly pull them back. Then it could drag the corpses away without anyone noticing. After listening to Hellion Vivian's last word, Anai felt like all the energy in his body had been drained away. He felt an unprecedented fear. How could the person in front of him be so smart? It was as if nothing could escape from this person's mind. This was really too scary. Not only Anai but even Anai Biao started to doubt whether he had prejudiced himself because of the fact that the other party did not have spiritual energy. This person was not an amateur, but a master. A master who was extremely dangerous to the Anai family's victory. Anai Biao lowered his eyes. There seemed to be something churning in the bottom of his eyes but no one noticed the black aura that came out of them. Only a certain huge shadow hidden in the ancient tomb looked at the scene reflected in the mirror and gave a sinister smile. I didn't expect that you could guess my identity. But even so, these people are still dead meat. Since the leader is in trouble, the ending won't be good. Let's kill each other quickly. This way, he would have the opportunity to taste the fresh and tender fetus that he couldn't forget. Chapter 760. Oldly turned around and looked at Hellion Vivian. What followed was a surge of admiration from the bottom of his heart. His respect for Inai Feng was because she was the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl. His admiration for this little brother Wei was because of his astonishing strength again and again. Everyone had seen spider silk before, but when they thought about it carefully, who would associate it with the current situation? What's more, even though they saw a sliver of silver light, they couldn't clearly see what it was. Only little brother Wei would have such an agile mind. All exorcists knew that in order to understand everything clearly in a short period of time, apart from wisdom, one must also have a strong reserve of knowledge. Not just anyone could do it. This person was really amazing. If he had spiritual energy, how powerful would he be? Oldly didn't dare to think about it. In order to prevent the Inai clan from being attacked again, Inai Biao couldn't help but say, since we know what happened to the corpse in front of us, shouldn't we continue to move forward and try to reach the main coffin as soon as possible? At this point, he had to think of a way to save the Inai clan's face. He couldn't let the Inai clan fall into a disadvantageous position again. The best opportunity now was for them to take the lead and pass under the corpse. Since it was the spider silk, there was nothing to be worried about. Inai Biao could see that the spider that spat out the silk wasn't there. So now was the best time to pass through. Moreover, even if something unexpected happened, sending two people out would allow him to analyze what kind of danger was ahead. After thinking about this, Inai Biao looked behind him. What the Inai clan didn't lack the least was people. These disciples were raised by him since they were young, so that they could be of use in the future. Qingshan, Qingshui, the two of you go first. Inai Biao ordered the two people behind him. Both of them were disciples of the Inai family. They were highly talented and had outstanding spiritual energy among the group. They were born to look down on exorcists from other families besides the Inai family. When they heard Inai Biao's words, they raised their chins and replied, "Yes, master." The two of them glanced at each other. Then, one of them took out a yellow talisman, while the other took out a peachwood sword. They were in high spirits and ready to go. At this time, the exorcists were looking at the Inai family in a different light. Initially, they had already regarded the Inai family as a villain, but Inai Biao's actions had moved them. After all, at times like this, no one would take the lead. Moreover, Inai Biao's natural order made them feel that they had misunderstood Inai Feng. Especially after hearing Inai Biao's words, Inai Feng coughed lightly and exhorted, "Be careful." Her gentle voice was accompanied by the soothing spiritual energy from her body. To be honest, that frail appearance of hers was very distressing. Hellion Vivian looked at the scene in front of her and didn't say anything. She only smiled. Compared to Inai Biao and Inai Feng were much more difficult to deal with. This pair of father and daughter already understood the human heart too well. They knew exactly what to do at what time, and even more so, they knew how to dispel other people's suspicions. At this time, it was undoubtedly dangerous to send one of his own people to take the lead. However, the exorcists only thought that Inai Biao was thinking for others, but they didn't think that the person taking the lead was not himself, but the disciples of the Inai family. These disciples did not have the blood of the Inai family flowing in them. They were extremely talented children who were selected from all over the country. They were trained as exorcists since young. Although their surname was Inai, in fact they were just pawns. This was because if Inai Biao saw them as one of his own, he would not be so generous and push them out without any hesitation. In fact, the reason was very simple. Inai Biao would not let Inai Hu take the lead no matter what, because Inai Hu was his son, and the others were just his disciples. Hellion Vivian did not like Inai Biao's way of doing things. She was the queen of firearms, and had many brothers under her command. Every time when there was a need for firearms, she would not let her brothers take the lead. Obviously, His Highness had seen through Inai Biao's thoughts. He stood behind Hellion Vivian with his long legs half bent, and his body leaning against the stone wall. He crossed his arms and smiled wickedly, his eyes full of mockery. Humans only knew how to play dirty tricks. However, as a demon, he still liked to see humans killing each other. Heh. Perhaps it was because Beligage's smile was too inappropriate. Hellion Vivian glanced at him, and thought about it according to His Highness's perverted thoughts. She asked, "You seem to be very happy." "Not bad." Beligage's smile deepened. His graceful and noble voice was low and pleasant. "Stay away from them. Don't get stained by the blood." Hellion Vivian was speechless. Was that the main point? Wait a minute. His Highness just said that there was blood? Hellion Vivian knew that Beligaju would never say something without a reason. She raised her head again and looked in front of her. Something was wrong. Since there was a demon guarding it, even if that demon was no longer around, it would not allow outsiders to enter so easily. Just as Hellion Vivian had this thought, she saw that Qing Shan and Qing Shui, who had just barged in, seemed to be caught by something. Then, followed by a scream, their complacent faces were filled with unprecedented fear. Then, their throats were slit by a silver thread. Blood spurted out from their bodies like a fountain, staining the ground. Qing Shan's situation was better. At least he still had a breath to struggle. Qing Shui, on the other hand, was in trouble. Before he could stick the yellow talisman, the silver wire took his last breath. Then with a force he was hung on the roof of the palace. Everything happened too quickly. By the time people reacted, they only had time to see the intricate silver threads that wrapped around Qing Shui's body. Those silver threads retreated at a very fast speed. Once the prey was fixed in place, it would become transparent. If one did not use a torch to illuminate it, it would be impossible to discover it. Qing Shan, who was standing in the middle, waved the peach wood sword in his hand like a madman. However, there was no effect. The silver wire was too sticky. It was impossible to cut it off when it touched the sword. "Mas Master, save Gu, save me." Qing Shan's fingers stretched forward, desperately trying to reach this side. Even before death, he still wholeheartedly believed that his master would save him. Enai Biao also took a step forward. In the eyes of others, he really did want to save Qing Shan. However, Hellion Vivian knew that the step was taken very carefully. He did not step into the area of the spider web. Chapter 761. There was no saving Qing Shan. Because the more you struggled, the tighter the spider silk would bind you. The smell of blood filled the entire tomb. Just like that, Qing Shan and Qing Shui were hung up, dripping with blood. Just like all the corpses, their postures were extremely strange. The curve on their faces wasn't a smile, but an illusion created by the spider's silk. The young exorcists vomited on the spot when they saw this. Even old Li's face was extremely pale. When the crowd saw the scene before them, they no longer dared to act rashly. Their eyes were shaking, and it was obvious that they were scared witless. There were too many factors in this tomb that they could not control. It was still the same old saying. If they had encountered something like a ghost or demon, they would not be afraid. However, everything in the mausoleum was too evil. They were like lambs that were being slaughtered with bare hands. They had no way of predicting what would happen next. What do we do now? The path ahead was definitely sealed. Looking at Qing Shan and Qing Shui's corpses, they finally understood why there were so many corpses here. These corpses were not all transported here from other places. Most of them were probably caught by the spider silk when they were on the path, and were hung on the roof. That was why there were so many of them. There were no less than 40 of them. It was just like how Qing Shan and Qing Shui's lives were taken away by the hidden spider silk the moment they took a step forward. Not to mention that the next tomb entrance was a whole room away. No matter what, they would have to take more than 10 steps to reach the next tomb entrance. What would happen? Some of the exorcists wiped the sweat off their foreheads and roared in a low voice. "It's useless. We can't reach the main coffin. Why don't we get out now while everyone is still alive?" That's right. Someone seconded. The rules of the competition also state that participants have the right to give up. I want to leave too. Out of the 30 or so people, about 10 of them wanted to go back. They weren't joking. Some of them even lowered their heads and started to pack up their things. Since they couldn't win, they might as well take the opportunity to leave now. At least they could save their lives. Who knew what they would encounter if they continued to walk? A few strands of spider silk could take away 2 lives in the blink of an eye. Thinking about it again, they had yet to encounter this creature in the graveyard. A giant spider was hiding in this cemetery, staring at them in the dark. Just thinking about it made them shiver all over. And Biao did not stop the exorcists. After all, the more people who quit, the better it was for him. Although he had thought about it, the way back was not necessarily safe. However, Hellion Vivian was different. She raised her eyes and interrupted everyone's fantasy. We can't get out. Why? After what happened just now, the exorcists started to pay more attention to Hellion Vivian's words. Hellion Vivian glanced at the corpses hanging on the ceiling, before retracting her gaze. She said unhurriedly, spiders are creatures that don't just weave their webs in one place. They are best at trapping their prey. Unlike other creatures that like to eat live prey, spiders like to wait until their prey is unable to retaliate before appearing. Before that happens, they will weave many webs to tightly bind their prey. I didn't expect a human to know my way of doing things so well. The gigantic creature in the dark narrowed its long and narrow eyes at the reflection in the mirror. It took a step forward with its countless feet. It seems that I need to prepare more before I can eat the baby in her belly. Just thinking about that delicious taste, it really makes one yearn for it. Tap. The water stains were brushed away by the tentacles. The giant shadow flashed past with its silver silk. Its lips were constantly moving, and it once again hid in the deep darkness. Only its red eyes could be faintly seen. At the side of the graveyard, the exorcists were very puzzled. They frowned and asked, "It's not that we haven't heard of spiders' habits. But does this have anything to do with us going out?" Hellion Vivian saw that the exorcists could not understand her, so she decided to be straightforward. Who can guarantee that you won't encounter spider webs when you go back? There weren't any when we came here, right? The exorcist's thoughts had yet to change. Hellion Vivian twitched the corner of her mouth. She was very helpless. There weren't any when we came here. But it doesn't mean that there won't be any when we go back. That spider could have taken advantage of the time when we were standing here to seal our way in. This is called trapping its prey. That's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. The exorcists cried out softly. Although they said that it was impossible, they believed Hellion Vivian in their hearts. Otherwise, the bags on their shoulders would not have slipped off. Exorcists were also humans. Naturally, they were afraid of death. If it's really like what Brother Wei said, then aren't we going to die? They had seen the power of spider webs. Now all the exits might be entangled by that spider. No matter where they went, they would not be able to escape. Why did it do that? Why didn't it just come and eat us? Some exorcists punched the wall fiercely. If they were face to face, they might not necessarily lose. Hellion Vivian thought to herself, if you can think of a solution, how can the spider not think of one? It's an ancient tomb. I reckon that the spider that lives here has already become a demon. Whether it's its body or its mind, from our current experience, that spider is not easy to deal with. Hellion Vivian's voice was very normal. It knows that as long as it blocks all the exits, we will starve to death in less than 7 days. Even if we don't starve to death, the water bottles we carry will run out. Sooner or later, we will die from lack of water. When that time comes, it will come out and eat everything it wants to eat. When all the exorcists heard her last sentence, they could not help but shudder. Only Bailey Jiaju's reaction was different. He chuckled softly, his voice was extremely graceful and luxurious, and there was a hint of disdain in his indifference. Such an aesthetic dining etiquette, only a stupid creature like the spider demon would do it. It's really unsightly. Everyone was speechless. Is this the time to comment on dining etiquette? Why does it seem like he's not on the same page as us? Seeing that everyone was looking at His Highness differently, Helly and Vivian could not help but cough lightly and change the topic. So we can only go forward now. We can't go back. The faster the better. Easy for you to say. And I who glanced at Helly and Vivian. If we go forward, will you take the lead? Chapter 762. Upon hearing this, everyone stopped in their tracks. His gaze towards Anai, who was filled with disapproval. Anai, who did not know that because of his repeated provocations, the exorcist's respect for the Anai family had already cracked. He was still holding his chin up and looking at Helly and Vivian with his eyebrows raised. Everyone knew that no one would take the lead in such a situation, because walking into the spider web area was a dead end. Qing Shan and Qing Shui were the best examples. He did not believe that the other party could still be so arrogant in such a situation. In the face of Anaihu's pride, Hellion Wei Wei merely glanced at him indifferently. Then she turned around and asked an unimportant question. Does the competition system still count? Competition system? What competition system? At that moment, some people could not react as they were still in the midst of a competition. After a moment of hesitation, they nodded and replied, yes, the one who reaches the main coffin the fastest and clears the most obstacles wins. Very good. After getting the answer she wanted, Hellion Wei Wei bent down and picked up a piece of stone. Then she stepped forward and walked over. Zhuge Yun's eyes were wide open. He reached out to stop her. Brother Wei, don't. You don't have to be angry with Anaihu. He has always been. Angry? Hellion Wei Wei blinked her eyes, then said, oh, with his level, he's not worth my attention. Aren't we having a competition? We can only win if we clear more obstacles. Her goal had always been clear, Saraira. Hearing Hellion Vivian's words, Zhuge Yun was stunned. So it was to win. No, even if it was to win, it was too dangerous. Before Zhuge Yun could finish his sentence, Hellion Vivian had already walked in front of him. Anai, who was infuriated by Hellion Wei Wei's arrogant attitude of disregarding him. He narrowed his eyes and waited for her to die a horrible death. The exorcists also frowned and looked at the center with solemn expressions. From the bottom of their hearts, they didn't want this little brother to die. Some people wanted to replace Hellion Vivian to go first, but they didn't have the slightest clue as to how to cross the spider web, so they could only stand in place and wait. Hellion Wei Wei bent down and picked up another stone. There were already 7 or 8 stones in her hand, all of which were nimbly tossed into the palm of her hand. No one could understand why she did this. When she threw the first stone forward, a ball of spider silk rolled out. Only then did the exorcists widen their eyes. Their eyes shook back and forth in disbelief. How could this work? Hellion Wei Wei continued to throw the pebbles forward. Her walking posture was very leisurely and slow. Often, she would wait until the pebbles rolled out a ball of spider silk before she took a step forward. That kind of lazy appearance looked as if she was playing, very indifferent. No one knew that in the eyes of the mercenary queen, spider silk was simply too weak. In any case, as long as you threw something over, you could break the patterns. It was unlike modern lasers, which were endless. Even if you wore optically sensitive glasses, you would still be in danger. Wei Wei pursed her thin lips. Along with the last stone thrown out, she had already walked to the entrance of the next cave. She absent-mindedly patted the dust off her hands. After that, she turned around and looked behind her. Her long, shapely eyebrows slightly raised as she said, all right, you guys can follow the path that I walked. Zhuge Yun was stunned. The exorcists even forgot to breathe at that moment. Only Bailey Jiaju moved. Compared to Hellion Wei Wei, he seemed to have more of the elegance unique to aristocrats. His posture was originally tall and straight. When his pair of slender legs moved forward, it was even more difficult for people to ignore. Everyone's eyes widened as they watched him walk in front of Hellion Wei Wei, without missing a single step. Then, he took her hand and wiped it with a handkerchief. Zhuge Yun was speechless. Brother Zhu's love for cleanliness was really too much. However, why did he feel that the scene just now was very beautiful? They were clearly 2 men. Was there any love or gentleness? He must have seen wrongly. Zhuge Yun shook his head. The poor young man thought that he was gay. He was so scared. After calming himself down, Zhuge Yin followed them. When he walked, he was much more cautious than Hellion Vivian. He was afraid that he would take a wrong step. In fact, there was nothing to be afraid of. Hellion Vivian walked over, because she knew that as long as the spider was not around, the spider web was dead. Once it was broken, it could not be repaired unless it came back and spun silk again. Zhuge Yin finally reached the other side. He was so nervous that his forehead was covered in sweat. After he relaxed, he immediately said to Xiao Ling and the others, "It's okay, come over here." At this time, Anaihu's expression could no longer be described as ugly. Especially when Xiao Ling said to him before she left, "You don't have the ability, but you still dare to provoke Boss Wei. You're really thick-skinned." In the past, Anaihu would never pay attention to people like Xiao Ling. This was because all the exorcists in the Exorcist City worshipped the Inai family as their role model. When did they start to mock him like this? Inai Biao was also aware of this. Unknowingly, these people no longer believed in his words as the truth as they used to. He had lived for so long and used all his efforts to suppress other families. In order to be respected, he did not hesitate to frame his best friend, Zhuge Sheng. He wanted to rule the entire exorcist tribe one day. It was not easy for him to achieve his goal, but his plan was affected by an outsider. Anai Biao clenched his teeth for a moment, but soon relaxed. It was not because of anything else, but because Elderly was still on their side. Yes, his daughter was the reincarnated Phoenix Girl. As long as the Phoenix Girl was around, no matter how powerful the other party was, they would not be able to shake the foundation of the Inai family. To the Exorcist tribe, the Phoenix Girl was a godlike existence. However, he really should think of a way to get rid of those two people. At least, he should kill the one with the surname Wei first. As soon as he thought of this, a sinister laugh rang in his ears. It was very low and hoarse. "I can help you. As long as you send the one with the surname Wei to me, I will eat her." Who's talking? Anai Biao looked behind him, but there was no one there. Suddenly, he felt a chill down his spine. His fingers subconsciously pulled out the peachwood sword at his waist. "You don't have to look for me anymore. You can't see me." The voice laughed. It sounded like a spider crawling on the ground. It was very scary. Chapter 763. I'm talking to your heart, and your heart is telling me that you need my help. After this, the next hole will be very dark. There's a protrusion on the left side of the wall. You just need to press it, and the person walking in front of you will fall into each hole. Even if they don't die, they will have to start from a new place. You and your Inai family army will be the ones walking in front. What do you think? Do you want to do it? Inai Biao did not answer, but at that moment, something seemed to emerge from his eyes, glowing eerily. The black spider knew that he was tempted, so it laughed again. Don't worry, no one will know that you're the one who did it, because it will only look like an accident, like the person walking in front accidentally triggered the mechanism in the ancient tomb. I promise you. Anai Biao interrupted it. But you have to promise me that you'll kill those two people. Sure. The black spider smiled when it answered. It was not stupid enough to provoke the man whose identity it could not figure out until now. It just wanted to use this resentful human to achieve its own goals, such as sending the man away, so that it could enjoy the baby that it had been longing for. Thinking of this, the black spider stuck out its scarlet tongue and licked in front of it. It could not wait any longer. No one could hear the deal between Anai Biao and the demon. Even his son, Anaihu, did not know why his father suddenly paused. Everything seemed normal. The exorcists walked forward one by one and entered a long tunnel. The tunnel was just like what Anai Biao had heard. It was very dark and narrow, and only one person could fit through it. Those who were slightly fatter had to walk sideways. Even so, they had to walk because there was only one path in front of them. When Hellion Weiwei was in the modern world, she often read books about grave robbing. The layout of all tombs was basically one layer after another. Usually, when they encountered such an extremely narrow tunnel, it meant that they were not far away from the main coffin. Hellion Vivian knew that they could not stay in the ancient tomb for too long. It was not her fault, but she was afraid that the baby would be affected in the tomb. The smaller fetus was indeed affected. The deeper they went, the fainter his aura became. As for the bigger fetus, he was practicing military boxing in Hellion Vivian's stomach. He also swept around to see if there were any undead that could be eaten. Then, he very coolly hugged the smaller fetus and said, "It will be fine when we get out of here. When the time comes, I will give you all the spirit energy that Mother fed us. You should eat more." Yes, the small fetus was already a little listless. It did not know why, but it had a very uncomfortable feeling, as if it was being watched by something. It was very uneasy, as if sensing the emotions of the smaller fetus. The bigger fetus did not even think about it, and planted a kiss on its forehead. "Don't let your mind wander. Big Brother is here." Small fetus. I feel like Big Brother is learning more and more words now. He even knows how to use random thoughts. But is it appropriate to use random thoughts here? The bigger fetus mistook the smaller fetus' suspicion for admiration. He was very happy, and puffed out his chest proudly. The small fetus was speechless. Forget it, it was better not to expose Big Brother. Let him continue to be happy. Hellion Vivian sensed the movement in her stomach. She rubbed her stomach and wanted to walk forward. Beligaju pulled her back. His slender fingers pointed behind him. His voice was very calm. But there was a hint of sincerity in his voice that only appeared in front of Hellion Vivian. "Are you an idiot? Do you always want to rush forward? Stand behind me and follow me closely." Okay. Hellion Vivian knew that His Highness was protecting her. Although the way His Highness protected her was always different from normal people, it was fine as long as she understood. The two of them walked one after the other. In the beginning, they were still holding hands. However, this posture was inconvenient, especially when Hellion Vivian's other hand was still holding a torch. She had to turn her body sideways. Later, Beligaju also sensed her tiredness. He reminded her, "Look under your feet." Then, he let go of Hellion Vivian's hand. Hellion Vivian was not a delicate woman. Under normal circumstances, she was very good at fighting, and was very sharp. Along the way, she even observed the ground. Even if there was a trap, she would be able to discover it in time. However, she did not know that the danger was not in front of her, but behind her. There was a loud boom. Before anyone could react to what was happening, their bodies started to fall rapidly. Everything was dark as far as the eye could see. Screams rang out at the same time. Even though she was falling, Hellion Vivian did not forget to protect her stomach. When she really touched the ground, she used her arms to land. In this way, although her stomach was protected, it could not avoid the fracture. However, compared to those who did not have skills, her landing was much better. Even though she had lost the spiritual energy and martial chi to protect her body, she relied on her rich experience to survive. Although one of her arms was soft and could not move, she had achieved her goal. However, she had achieved her goal. Protecting the baby was more important than anything else. On the other hand, Beligaju was not as open-minded as Hellion Vivian. His feet were suspended in mid-air. At this time, his soul-stirring eyes had turned into a deep gold. His black robe seemed to have sensed the hostility from its master, and it tore apart the silence of the tomb. At that moment, almost all the undead in the ancient tomb trembled in fear. How could this be? What kind of person came to the ancient tomb? Why were they so afraid? The fear that came from the deepest part of their blood made them bend down. There was no answer. Even Enai Biao did not expect the man in front of him to be able to avoid the disaster just now. How fast did he have to be to do that? He was so abnormal that he did not seem like a human being. Beligaju was not in the mood to look at the people around him. He narrowed his eyes and quickly swept to his left. At this time, the black spider did not know that it had provoked the most dangerous person. Its scarlet eyes stared greedily at the prey in front of it, saliva dripping down from its teeth. The moment Hellion Vivian fell to the ground, she felt that there was something behind her. Ignoring the pain in her arm, she immediately rolled and looked toward the shadow. Chapter 764. In the middle of the densely packed spider web, a giant poisonous spider was lying there eerily. Its whole body was covered in gray hair, and it was almost the size of 4 adults. There were 2 small eyes on its head, and its 8 legs were half-bent, ready to attack the food in front of it at any time. Its body was oblong, and the front half was its head and chest, while the back half was its chubby belly. Its 4 pairs of legs were running quickly towards Hellion Vivian, and its slender red eyes were filled with desire. Hellion Vivian realized that she was not in a tunnel, but a nest built by the spider in front of her. Those who understood spiders knew that once one fell into their nest, no matter how strong one was, one could not escape, especially when the other party was a poisonous spider. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes, and one hand pressed on her left shoulder, and stood up with difficulty. Her clothes were stained with scarlet, and she could clearly see that the spider was salivating at her. These low-level demons that evolved from animals were not like the high-level demons that were born with magic. They did not have the slightest bit of human gentleness, and even the most important dining etiquette of demons did not exist in them. Just like the poisonous spider, it liked the thrill of tearing its food into pieces. The more mangled the human was, the more it liked it. The venomous spider stuck out its tongue and licked its thin lips. Following its actions, a sinister voice rang in Hellion Weiwei's ears. I really didn't expect that a pregnant woman would dare to enter the tomb. It has been 500 years, and I will not forget this smell. It belongs to the unique smell of a baby. Indeed, meat that has not been born is the most tender and delicious. As the black spider spoke, it walked towards Hellion Vivian. When its feet stepped on the ground, the surrounding spider web would sway. Hellion Vivian felt her ankle tighten, and her left leg was trapped. When the silver silk stuck to her leg, she felt excruciating pain. She could even hear the sound of her joints cracking. Damn it! She cursed in her heart. The blood on her forehead flowed to the corner of her eyes, blurring her vision. However, she didn't move. When one was trapped in a spider web, the more one moved, the tighter they would be entangled. It didn't matter if her legs or hands were injured, as long as the baby in her belly was not hurt. At the same time, Hellion Vivian was observing her opponent's fatal points. She was a military fire agent. Even if she did not have martial chi, her first reaction when she was in danger was to think about how to get rid of her opponent. However, this time, she had to face a spider that was 5 times bigger than her. Furthermore, its entire body was filled with venom. If she was not careful, she would be poisoned. Under such circumstances, Hellion Vivian knew that the most important thing was to stay awake. Poison Spider was still immersed in his own wonderful world. The tip of his tongue licked the blood that Silver Thread had brought over. His demonic red eyes suddenly turned into a thin line. I didn't expect to meet such a rare specimen. Although you don't have any spiritual energy, you're more delicious than the exorcists I've tasted. This is really an unexpected gain. After saying this, Poison Spider's ugly face became unusually excited. A foul smell came out of its nose, and its sharp claws could not help but want to completely disintegrate the human in front of it. Poison Spider let out a crazy and terrifying laugh. However, when it realized that the human in front of it did not show any fear, it raised its guard. Woman, you're indeed one of the smarter humans I've seen. All these years, no one has ever been able to break through the spider web I've set up. You're the first. However, I advise you to give up on your current thoughts and stop struggling. Weiwei tightly pursed her thin lips. A piercing pain transmitted from her 4 limbs. Her pale and handsome face was stained with blood, yet she didn't reveal the slightest bit of emotion. Only that pair of clear eyes were dyed red by the blood flowing from her forehead. It was good that she could talk. That way she could buy some time. Hellion Vivian looked at Poison Spider, that was slowly walking towards her. Her mind was spinning rapidly. Her voice was neither fast nor slow. I didn't smell you when I was up there, and I didn't touch any traps. It's impossible for me to fall down just like that, unless there are some hidden traps that we can't see. However, even so, someone has to touch them. At that time, we were the only ones in the tunnel. You weren't there. That means you have people among the exorcists. You're really smart. Poison Spider narrowed its eyes. But it's a pity that you humans can't resist temptation. Hehe, since you're going to die anyway, I don't mind telling you. Among your group of exorcists, there are already people who have been infected with resentment. They can be controlled by demons with just a few words. Other demons can't detect it. But I've been in the graveyard for thousands of years. I'm especially sensitive to such people. Moreover, one of you is no longer alive. Since you're going to die in the end, you might as well be eaten by me. Hellion Vivian did not carefully analyze the meaning of Poison Spider's words. She only wanted to buy some time, so she asked again, "If you really want to eat me, wouldn't it be better to appear at the tunnel and eat me directly? Why waste time to bewitch humans? You're hiding like this. Are you afraid?" "Afraid?" Poison Spider laughed mockingly as if he had heard a joke. "The man beside you is indeed powerful. But if we really fight, I might not lose to him. It's just that I prefer to be like this, waiting for my prey to fall into my net. If you want to buy some time and wait for that man to come and save you, I advise you to save your breath. From the hole you fell to here, you have to cross the entire ancient tomb. Unless he can break through all the stone walls, otherwise, no matter how fast he is, he will need to walk for 6 hours before he can see you. By then, I'll have eaten you until there's not even a bone left. Woman, I've already told you, don't try to be smart in front of me. Originally, I have no interest in eating a human like you. You don't have spiritual energy like those exorcists. But now that I think about it, once I peel open your stomach and eat you, it'll be delicious." Saying that, Poison Spider licked its lips again. It was different from other animals. When it licked its lips, it would make the sound of spitting silk. That kind of sound echoed in the empty and dark nest. It was so cold that it made one's scalp numb. If it was someone else who fell in, their legs would have been trembling by now. Hellion Wei Wei, on the other hand, was only thinking of a solution. Under her long sleeves, her right hand was holding an exquisite silver gun. She had been hesitant to shoot at the venomous spider. Firstly, it was because if its venomous blood splashed out, it was very likely that it would endanger her life. Secondly, if she wanted to hit its vital points, she must wait until it was close enough to her. Chapter 765. However, its 8 legs were very difficult to deal with, because it was very likely that the black spider would use one leg to block the bullet, while the other leg went straight for her lower abdomen when she fired the gun. Hellion Vivian was right. When the black spider's entire body was pressed down, its 8 legs were very agile. It sinisterly held down her broken arm, while its remaining 7 legs were used to restrain her arms. Some of them were used to tear at her abdomen. Just as Hellion Vivian was about to shoot, the black spider was blocked by an unknown force. Even 2 of its legs had been forcibly broken. Roar! The black spider let out a low roar that it had never let out before. Countless spider webs shot out from its body. It had never felt such pain before and stopped moving. Its small eyes looked at its broken legs, then at Hellion Vivian's abdomen. It refused to believe that it could not tear at it again. This time, the unknown force was even stronger. It directly bounced its entire body back, causing it to fall heavily onto the ground. Even with the protection of the spider web, the fall was not light. Its internal organs were in pain from the shock, and its throat was dry and painful. "Oomph! You dare to bully Imperial Mother? Try it again, and see how I'll teach you a lesson." The fetus in her stomach had learned how to shout. Its voice was unique and cool, and its posture was very charming. Unfortunately, no one could hear it except for the smaller fetus. "Big brother, you're so awesome." There was nothing that made the bigger fetus prouder than being praised by the smaller fetus. He puffed out his little chest and said in a cold and arrogant manner, "Don't worry, with Big Brother here, that ugly and smelly black spider can forget about getting close to you and Imperial Mother." The smaller fetus nodded. Although its body was very weak, it still pricked up its little ears and tried its best to listen to the sounds outside, afraid that its Imperial Mother would be hurt. The black spider moved its aching legs and stood up again with great difficulty. How long has it been? How long has it been since it was in such a sorry state? Even if it had encountered a top-notch exorcist, it could have chewed them up effortlessly. What did this woman just do? He actually broke its leg. Everyone knew what a spider's 8 legs meant to it. They were its sharp claws, and a necessary tool to weave its web. It was simply unforgivable. The venomous spider's eyes turned red. In its rage, it attacked even more ferociously. But in the end it was bounced back. Not only that, only 4 of its 8 legs were left. This was the first time the venomous spider had tasted a thorny problem. It was in so much pain that it broke out in cold sweat. Perhaps it was wrong. It was not that woman who had shaken it off. It was her stomach. That's right, her stomach. Black Spider's eyes shook violently. He pointed at Hellion Vivian with one of his legs, and said in a trembling voice, "You, what is in your stomach? Was he a monster? No, that's impossible. I clearly smelled the most delicious spiritual energy, so it should still be very weak. How? How could it be so powerful?" Hellion Vivian also realized that the baby in her stomach was not ordinary. She always knew that her baby would not be like a normal human. After all, His Highness' genes were too overbearing, so it would definitely be a little devil. However, even Hellion Vivian did not expect that the child would be so good at fighting before it was even born. It had completely defeated the venomous spider. Moreover, Hellion Vivian did not know if it was an illusion, but she felt that the child was specifically aiming for the venomous spider's legs. The venomous spider, which was missing a leg, looked really funny. There was an old saying that went, "No one knows a child better than his mother." The bigger fetus was pointing at the venomous spider coldly for the smaller fetus to see. "Look at it, isn't it funny? When we get out, Big Brother will catch a venomous spider for you to play with. Then, we will break its legs one by one and make it your toy." Okay. The smaller fetus smiled. These 2 children's taste was really like their father's, slightly twisted. At this moment, the venomous spider in the shadows had already realized the problem. It was very smart, and quickly knew how to avoid such an attack. As long as it moved closer, and spat out silk from a distance, the tenacious spider silk would wrap around the woman tightly, until she was strangled to death. Although this method would destroy the most delicious taste of the food, once the mother died, the fetus would also die an hour later. However, the current situation allowed it to do so. Otherwise, it would not have any chance of winning at all. The venomous spider was still afraid, because it did not know what kind of fetus would have such a strong demonic aura. That's right, at that moment, what was emitted from the woman's stomach was indeed demonic aura. Strange, what it smelled was spiritual energy. So why did it turn into demonic aura when it got closer? The venomous spider did not know that once a high-level demon made a contract with a human, the human's existence would cover up the demonic aura on the demon's body. Whether it was the demon itself or the demon's child, it would be the same. Therefore, until now, the venomous spider had not seen through Beligage's true form. It was also because of this reason that it did what it regretted the most in its life, which was the idea of killing Hellion Vivian. The venomous spider narrowed its eyes again, and its body bulged backward. It wanted to use a silver thread to directly bind Hellion Vivian's neck. The vigilant Hellion Vivian noticed the venomous spider's action, and saw through what it wanted to do at a glance. Just as she was about to raise her foot, there was a rumbling sound. Countless stones rolled down from the left wall, and smashed into the venomous spider's 4 feet that were already in pain. Stone dust flew everywhere, and the venomous spider's nest collapsed. From the flying stone dust, a slender and tall figure walked out. His entire body exuded a thick evil aura, like an ink-colored fog, making him look very unreal, as though he had merged with the darkness. It's him. That man who looks like he is not to be trifled with. Did he really pass through the stone wall? His body was covered in blood, and the venomous spider smelled it. It was not human blood, but the blood of its descendants. He just stood there, his slender hands wrapped in snow-white gloves, and even his sleeves and collar were exquisite to the point of elegance, making him look like a noble living in the 19th century. He was like a lonely snowflake in 1,000 mountains, arrogant, cold, and appropriate. However, the venomous spider knew that hidden under this appropriateness was an overwhelming murderous aura. Its natural instinct made it give up on attacking Hellion Vivian, and turn to face Beligaju, spitting out the venomous silk. Chapter 766. Venomous Spider knew that at this moment, as long as the man was not prepared, the spider silk it spat out would definitely break his neck. No matter how powerful this man was, he would not be able to escape. As expected, the silver silk wrapped around the man's neck, and it was very tight. Huh, you're not that strong either? Venomous Spider looked at Beligaju, who was bound by it. Its remaining limbs touched the man's face in disdain. It thought that this man would be very difficult to deal with. Seeing how he could punch through a stone wall, it thought that it would take some time to deal with him. It did not expect that although this man's martial arts were powerful, he was a fool. At the very least, he was not smart enough. He did not even have time to react before he became its meal. Venomous Spider laughed out loud. Then it narrowed its eyes. How dare you destroy my place and kill so many of my disciples? There was a path to heaven, but you refused to take it. There was no door to hell, but you insisted on barging in. Watch how I disembowel you. Oh, disembowel me? Facing Venomous Spider's murderous gaze, Beligaju was still smiling. His tone was really like he was chatting with someone. His attitude had never been so amiable before. Hellion Vivian could not bear to look at Venomous Spider anymore. This demon did not know that the Kinderer Prince was. The scarier he was when he fought. Brother, is that spider looking for trouble? The smaller fetus glanced at the bigger fetus. The bigger fetus looked back at him with incomparable calmness. Do you know what is the most perverted thing about father? The smaller fetus shook its head. I don't know. You're trying to defame father again, aren't you? The more you dislike something, the more he wants you to do it. Or the things you want to do, he wants you to do them to your heart's content. When the bigger fetus said this, it was very disdainful. He only knows how to use such shameless methods. However, that spider is really stupid. How dare it mock father, that demon? The smaller fetus was speechless. At the end of the day, you just want to defame father. Sigh, you always defame him. Brother, is the first thing you do when you go out to fight father? The black spider did not know that it had offended the person it should not have. It moved its limbs and spat out spider silk again. Die. As a person, the thing I dislike the most is sticky and dirty things, because that makes me very disgusted. When the last word came out of its mouth, the air around Beligaju seemed to be sucked into a vacuum. Something dark suddenly sprang out from the ground under his feet. Venomous Spider did not expect that the spider silk that wrapped around the man would turn into a puddle of water. Such a situation had never happened before. Venomous Spider raised his remaining 4 legs and looked at the scene in front of him in horror. Dangerous, extremely dangerous. That man was. Their eyes widened to the maximum. At this moment, everyone's hair stood on end. They had to escape to escape. If they did not escape, they could not breathe. If the sound of breathing was heard, they would be killed. The venomous spider did not know why it had such a reaction. If it was a little older, or if it was like a high-level demon, it would know that this was the respect demons had for their king. Once you became a demon, the submission and fear would surge out from your blood. Leave this place. Leave this place. Venomous Spider's mind was filled with this thought. It started to run. However, a tearing pain suddenly attacked it. It let out a shrill roar as it fell heavily to the ground. No one saw what had happened. By the time he felt the pain, he had already been stomped to the ground by that man. That's right, stepped on. Unlike the dirty and smelly shoes of most of the people who came here, the black boot that stepped on it was spotless. There was no flaw in the workmanship, and it even gave off an indescribable sandalwood smell. But this was not the main point. The main point was, its weight and size were 5 times that of a normal person. Logically speaking, only a demon that was bigger than it could suppress it with just strength. But this man, he actually stepped on it with 1 foot. Not only that, its ribs seemed to be broken. Do you still want to fight? Then the demon smiled again. Whoosh! Black feathers appeared out of nowhere and fluttered in the air. It was a beautiful sight. A thick black fog spread out. Surrounded by feathers, the unfathomable man walked over. His eyes were filled with an evil white gold color, like a cat's eyes. When he narrowed his eyes slightly, they emitted a cold light that made Poison Spider unable to move anymore. When the giant venomous spider saw Bailey Jiaju's pair of golden eyes. It immediately knelt on the ground and trembled as it curled up its body. Its face was filled with unprecedented respect and fear. No, no more fighting. How could it be him? The one who controlled the darkness and loved to play with people's hearts. Even if it trained for thousands of years, it would still kneel down and worship the king. Why is he here? Heavens, what did I do just now? It actually provoked the most ruthless king. Venomous Spider was filled with regret. However, its regret was of no use to Beligaju. He bent down and placed the Hellion Vivian on its soft feathers. His eyes looked at the trembling venomous spider, and a bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face. What should I do? I still want to fight. As he spoke, Beligaju smiled. His fangs bit down on his black gloves, and his thin lips softly spat out a string of laughter. His eyes that were filled with golden marks narrowed. Venomous Spider felt its heart twist into a ball. It supported its body and began to kneel down and beg for mercy. King, I didn't know it was you. Please forgive me this time on account that we are both demons. Oh, Beligaju seemed to have heard a funny joke. You want me to forgive you? Venomous Spider nodded its huge head. Heh. Beligaju curved his thin lips and grabbed one of its legs. He used force. You hurt my most precious thing, and you still expect me to forgive you. Crack. The crisp sound of bones breaking. Beligaju blew on his palm, and then threw the huge venomous spider into the air. Then he jumped up and his long robe fluttered. His elegant long legs bent slightly, and he kicked Venomous Spider's sixth leg. She is my most precious thing. How dare you eat her? Even if it was a huge venomous spider, it could not endure such physical and mental torture. It had to be said that His Highness had his own unique views on how to train demons. After a short while, Venomous Spider was beaten to the point of no return. It would rather die than be tortured like this. It bit its lips and made a whimpering sound. Beligaju smiled again, but there was no warmth in his eyes, only coldness. You said you were just thinking? You didn't dare to do it? Chapter 767. Venomous Spider nodded heavily and looked at Beligaju with tears in its eyes. The bigger fetus snorted and his cool, soft, and arrogant voice sounded again. How stupid. Taking revenge is a basic requirement for us as demons. Does this venomous spider not have any common sense? Or does it think that Father will be soft-hearted? What a waste of its eyes. Father is a vengeful person. If he doesn't kill it, he won't stop. The smaller fetus agreed with his older brother on this point. However, the strange thing was that Father stopped moving. Not only that, he even released the force he used to crush Venomous Spider. He stood there with his long and slender body and smiled gently. Do you like to eat? What is Father doing? Is he going to treat that stupid venomous spider to a meal? The smaller fetus and bigger fetus looked at each other and became more excited. Venomous Spider did not expect the man to ask such a question. It was stunned for a moment before it heaved a sigh of relief. Since the other party was chatting with it, it meant that he was not going to kill it. Venomous Spider tried to suppress the joy that was surging out and nodded again. Venomous Spider could not be blamed for thinking that way. His Highness looked too elegant and approachable. Then eat all of these. Beligaju smiled and raised his chin. He signaled Venomous Spider to look under his feet with his eyes. Venomous Spider was very happy at first. It escaped with its life, and now there was something to eat. Although it was not hungry, it was better than dying. However, when it followed the other party's gaze, the joy on its face froze. King, did you make a mistake? Venomous Spider was hopeful as it asked in a trembling voice. Bailey Jiaju absent-mindedly tidied up his sleeves. His thin lips held a smile. That's right, these are the things eat. But those are rocks. Venomous Spider could not help but roar. It wanted to cry but had no tears. Hearing that, Beligaju raised his leg again and stomped on Venomous Spider's last leg. The sound of bones breaking was heard, and it was painful to hear. However, Beligaju still smiled faintly and raised his eyes. Why? You don't want to eat? Venomous Spider did not dare to question his words anymore. It endured the pain and shouted, I want to eat. I want to eat. If you want to eat, then do it yourself. Do you want me to feed you? Bang! Another kick, but this time, his face was flattened. Venomous Spider immediately cried and shook his head. Because his mouth was crushed, even his voice was muffled. I will eat it myself. I will eat it myself. After that, it picked up a relatively small stone with its painful limbs, and hesitated for a moment. Baligija didn't move. He just looked at it with a smile. Poison Spider shut his eyes tightly. Without even looking at it, he swallowed the rock. Hellion Vivian didn't need to think about it to know that swallowing stones would definitely be very uncomfortable. The venomous spider was indeed in a lot of pain, but fortunately, its body was relatively large. It wouldn't die from swallowing a rock, but its throat was a little unbearable. Just as it swallowed and thought it was over, Baligija's gentle voice sounded again. Eat more. If it's not enough, I can still get you a few more pieces. Hearing this, Poison Spider's face instantly turned pale. I am actually not that hungry. Hee. Poison Spider struggled. Baligiju had already walked to Hellion Vivian's side. His right hand gently brushed her injured ankle. His eyes were extremely cold, like a sharp diamond flashing in the light. Eat. That one word made Poison Spider spit out a mouthful of blood. It didn't dare to delay, so it buried its head and stuffed the rocks beside it into its mouth. Its teeth were in pain from the cuts. The huge benefits of its body became less and less reliable as more and more rocks entered its mouth. The only thing Poison Spider felt was pain. Its stomach was completely bloated, and it was uncomfortable. However, it had to continue eating, because the other party's gaze was firmly locked on it. It didn't know what it would face if it stopped. Its esophagus was so full that it couldn't stuff anything into it. The extremely painful feeling of fullness made Poison Spider's tears flow out. If it was asked what it regretted the most in its life, it would be grabbing a pregnant woman in a graveyard, coveting the fetus in the pregnant woman's stomach, and provoking the person it shouldn't have provoked the most. Poison Spider's eating gradually slowed down. It even seemed to have difficulty opening its mouth. The two fetuses in the stomach watched this scene, and swallowed their saliva. The two of them finally understood what it meant by, I'll let you do what you want to do as long as you want to do it. This was too much. If the stupid spider continued eating, its stomach would explode. Brother. The smaller fetus nudged the bigger fetus with its head. The bigger fetus stared at it and said in a deep voice, Yes? You better not provoke father when you go out in the future. This time, the smaller fetus used an affirmative sentence, as if warning the bigger fetus. He was worried that his older brother wouldn't be able to win against father. The bigger fetus narrowed his big eyes. This old man is indeed more shameless than I thought. The smaller fetus. This is not just shameless anymore. But this is a good idea. When the bigger fetus said this, his voice was especially strong. The smaller fetus. Is it really good for you to accept it so quickly? He felt that he had to communicate with his mother and ask her to pay attention to his older brother's prenatal education. What if his older brother went astray? If anyone dares to eat you in the future, I will use this method to deal with them. The bigger fetus reached out and hugged the smaller fetus. He was as arrogant as ever. No one is allowed to bully you. The smaller fetus smiled. Yes. Forget it. What was the point of pranking him? As long as his older brother was happy, it was fine. Moreover, Mother had always been teaching them to apply what they had learned. Unable to hear the conversation between the two fetuses, Poison Spider only wanted to die now. It looked at Baligija's action of protecting Hellion Vivian with tears in its eyes. Before it suddenly understood, it seemed to have understood something. Could it be that this human's baby was the king's? Poison Spider widened its eyes again. Then it was so full that it wanted to vomit. It vomited acid, and its face was extremely pale. However, because there was a stone in its mouth, it could not vomit at all. As if he had seen through its thoughts, Bailey Jiaju walked over and whispered in its ears again. If you spit it out, eat it again. Poison Spider's mouth was crooked. It endured the pain and swallowed down. It was this last piece that caused blood to bubble up in its throat. It was only one step away from death. Baligija looked at it and smiled in satisfaction. Then he slowly lowered his voice, and it was bone-chilling. Didn't you say that you were only thinking about it? Then I will tell you now. You can't even think about my prey. Chapter 768. Bang! For the last kick, Baligaju landed on the venomous spider's stomach. He didn't need to use a lot of strength to make the venomous spider suffer a fate worse than death. It only had one breath left. More and more blood bubbles came out of its throat, but it couldn't stop it. Hellion Vivian watched this scene silently. She thought that Mr. Spider must have never thought that he would die from overeating one day. In fact, the process of dying from overeating was quite slow. It was even more painful than death by 1,000 cuts. The venomous spider would hold on to its last breath for a short period of time. Then it would be a fate worse than death. After dealing with the venomous spider, Baligaju walked back. However, this time there was no smile on his face. When he looked at Hellion Vivian's wound again, countless black feathers fell from behind him. Even the stone under his feet cracked. If I still couldn't find you, I would crush all the living and dead here. His tone was still the same as before. It was so calm that no one could hear his emotions. However, Hellion Vivian knew that at that moment, what he said was his true thoughts. It could be seen from the fact that he broke the stone walls of the ancient tomb. She knew very well that no matter how elegant Baligaju looked, he was actually the darkest and most vicious person in his heart. It was just a matter of which side of him he was willing to show to the world. In front of her, he would even clean up the bloodstains before letting her open her eyes. It was as if he wanted to maintain the perfect image in her heart. It was also as if he didn't do many things because she was around. For example, Enihu's repeated provocations. If it was only His Highness alone, Hellion Vivian didn't need to think to know how miserable Enihu's death would be. His Highness could even make him feel like the venomous spider. Even death would be a relief. This person was hated since he was young, whether it was his birth mother or his father. It wasn't that she had never seen his childhood situation. It was because she had seen it that she felt pain in her heart. Perhaps this was the feeling of liking someone. Even if he was an executioner who massacred everyone, you would only care if he was anxious when you saw him. Hellion Vivian reached out and hugged His Highness. She said with a smile, "It's okay. I'm fine. You came in time." The man's tall and straight figure paused for a moment, and then he slowly opened his hands. All the hostility turned into gentleness, and he pressed the head in front of him, which always made him lose his sense of propriety, into his arms. His thin lips pursed. "Now you can't please me, but this kind of thing will only happen once." He said the last sentence to himself. The moment Hellion Vivian disappeared, Baligaju finally tasted the feeling of regret described by humans. No matter if he was a human or a demon, he never knew what regret was. Nothing could escape his control. But at that time he regretted. He regretted not holding this idiot's hand all the time. He regretted not taking out this damn spider and crushing it to death in the first place. Baligaju's arms tightened again, and his low voice was like quicksand. "I really should lock you up so that you can't go anywhere." "How can that be? I still have to find relics to feed the baby." Hellion Vivian smiled beautifully. After a while, she seemed to think of something, and her shrewd eyes narrowed. "Why did that spider say that my stomach was full of spiritual energy? Shouldn't it be evil energy? It's so strange." Baligaju raised his eyebrows. "That is to say, you were targeted because of the little ghost in your stomach." Hellion Vivian said, "That's not the point. I said before that the little ghost was a troublemaker before it was born." Baligaju had been dissatisfied with a certain little ghost for a long time. Although it was his child, it didn't affect his dislike of it. When the bigger fetus heard Baligaju's words, he directly protested. "If you want to talk about troublemakers, then father is." The smaller fetus didn't respond to the bigger fetus, but lowered its small head as if thinking about something. The bigger fetus continued with a cold snort. "If it weren't for father's affections back then, why would a fake phoenix girl come out and fight with mother for the Saraira? She made the capital city a mess. Not only did she affect mother, but she also infected me with Yin energy. Mother had no choice but to come to the ancient tomb. It's all because of me. The smaller fetus dispiritedly interrupted the bigger fetus. If it wasn't for me, Mother wouldn't have lost the spirit energy and martial chi in her body. I've thought about this. The food that Big Brother ate was caught from outside. Only I had to constantly absorb spirit energy to maintain my current state. Mother lost her spirit energy when I was born. The poisonous spider targeted Mother because of the aura emitted from my body. If it wasn't for me, perhaps Mother wouldn't have to suffer so much. The bigger fetus didn't say anything at first. It just looked at the smaller fetus calmly. Then, it hugged the smaller fetus in its arms and put away its usual arrogance, leaving only softness. If what you said is true, then I shouldn't exist. I'm Mother's nemesis. Now that I'm in her stomach, I've attracted a lot of Yin energy. When I'm born, I might even lose my mind and reach my claws for Mother. Whenever I think of that scene, I feel that it's better to just stay in Mother's stomach like this. Or just not exist at all. At least this way, Mother won't be in danger. No Big Brother has to be here. The smaller fetus leaned its head over again. Big Brother is so useful. He can protect Mother at critical times. The bigger fetus didn't say anything else. The smaller fetus also stopped talking. The two of them hugged each other for warmth, but they couldn't resist the thoughts in their hearts. As if she sensed the movement in her stomach, Hellion Vivian reached out and caressed her lower abdomen. Her movements were gentler than before. She looked at Beligaju and said in a clear voice, "He's not trouble. He's the person I love the most besides you." Bailey Jiaju was not prepared to be confessed to out of the blue. He reached out and covered Hellion Weiwei's eyes with his hands. Then, he kissed her and pressed his lips against hers. Even his breath was warm. Hellion Vivian sniffed the familiar mint scent and nestled in his arms, allowing him to check her wound. Her fingers were weak, but she didn't forget about the important matter. "You've always thought that the baby is a demon, right?" "Yes." Beligaju looked at Hellion Vivian's bleeding ankle with heavy eyes, thinking about something. Hellion Vivian frowned. "But the poisonous spider thinks that the baby in my stomach is very spiritual. Its sense of smell won't be wrong, unless..." Chapter 769. Hellion Vivian's eyes suddenly lit up. Her long legs, which were originally in a daze, suddenly bent forward. There was a rare excitement on her face. "I have 2 babies in my belly. That's right. It must be so." Hellion Weiwei looked at Bailey Jiaju with a smile in her eyes. "Because the demonic nature of one of them is too strong. As a father, it's easy for you to not sense the other baby's aura. However, the other magical creatures can't sense the demonic nature of the other baby. Since he's in my body, he can successfully conceal his aura. Under such circumstances, the other baby's weak spiritual aura will seep out and be detected by the other magical creatures. When we came to the ancient tomb, the magical creature in the sea waterfall was also targeting me, although it was scared away by you before it could get close to me. But if you think about it carefully, even if it wanted to eat someone, it should have targeted Zhuge Yun, who has spiritual aura. Now it seems that it must be because of the babies." Hellion Vivian's eyes became brighter as she spoke. She reached out and stroked her lower abdomen. When it came to the topic of children, she would speak with a gentleness that encompassed all things in the world. At this time, if Senior Li was here, he would definitely feel familiar. Unfortunately, Senior Li was not here. Hellion Vivian only talked to Beligaju endlessly. "There are 2 babies, but the palace only made a pair of tiger head shoes and a set of clothes. Imperial Grandfather also ordered the palace to make a small dragon bed. Now it seems that we need to add another set. Also, those small bowls and chopsticks are made in the style of boys. Previously, you said that one of them is a boy. I don't know if the other one is a boy or a girl. If it is a girl, then we have to make it according to the princess's style. I always feel that there are a lot of things to do when we go back. I don't know if the 2 little buns will fight when they are placed together. Or will one hug the other? When the time comes, let them carry small school bags to the White Academy together. That will definitely be very cute." After hearing Hellion Vivian's words, the smaller fetus was stunned for a moment. His heart that was originally filled with self-blame gradually warmed up. He looked at the bigger fetus blankly and cutely and said, Mother knows me. Brother, mother knows me. Yes. The bigger fetus lowered his head and imitated how his mother stroked them. He stroked the smaller fetus head and said, "Furthermore, mother likes you very much. Look at how happy mother is." Of course, the small fetus saw it. He turned his big eyes and said gently and seriously, "Big brother, we have to go out together. We can't let mother be disappointed and sad." "Okay," the bigger fetus said coolly as he hugged the bigger fetus. He was now half a head taller than the small fetus. Originally, there were only two small silhouettes, and they couldn't even be called a child. However, because the bigger fetus expression looked like a small adult, when he held the smaller fetus, he didn't have the hostility he had when he grabbed the dead spirit. He looked like a good older brother, and even knew to lower his head to kiss the head of the smaller fetus. The picture was indescribably warm and cute. Baligaju was also stunned. He did not expect that there would be two babies. In other words, other than Imp, there was another human. A human like Vivian? Baligaju's eyes darkened. When his fingers rubbed Hellion Vivian's leg, he suddenly pressed his body down. This time, he did not kiss Hellion Vivian's lips. Instead, his lips fell on her injured ankle, and the tip of his tongue licked the blood on it. If the other baby was a human, then they would have to speed up. He was a demon, and he understood the nature of demons better than anyone else. Sometimes, even if they were unwilling, the existence of demons was to rob. When the day came that they needed more nutrients to sustain themselves, they would make a move on the other baby. This had never happened before. One was a demon, and the other was a human. It was like locking a wolf and a sheep together. One day, the sheep would become the wolf's food. This was a cruel way of saying it, but this was a demon. He exuded viciousness and selfishness from his bones. No matter how glamorous his appearance was, it could not change this. Just like how he clearly knew that the woman in front of him did not belong to this world. After a long time, she was destined to be punished by the heavens. But he still forced her to stay by his side. He did not even want to let a second person see her. Baligaju laughed self-deprecatingly. What a crazy possessiveness. Perhaps his mother in the human world was right. He was deformed. But so what? Even if he changed his life and dyed the world with blood, she had to stay by his side. In this regard, he was a little similar to the exorcist's guardian. However, in this life he was the one who found her first. And that guardian, mistakenly thought that the other person was her reincarnation. Baligaju did not know what happened when they were gods together. After falling from the sky, his bloodline had turned black. He looked down on gods and demons. All living beings were no different in front of him. Only she, Hellion Vivian, was the only one he wanted. He did not care if what those old men said was true, even if the person she liked at that time was not him. But now, the person who had her was him. The moment the blood entered his throat, Baligaju's eyes turned red. Hellion Vivian did not know what Baligaju was thinking. She only felt that the place where she was kissed was a little numb. She wanted to retract her leg. "Hey, what are you doing? Don't you think the blood is dirty?" "It's not dirty. It's very sweet." When Baligaju raised his head, the tip of his tongue licked his thin lips. The peach blossom eyes under his black hair flashed with a bewitching smile. He was so handsome that he could make any girl's heart flutter. "But it needs to be disinfected." As he said that, he clenched his fingers, and his black nails dug into his palm. Bright red blood dripped from his palm onto her wound, drop by drop. Not only did Hellion Vivian freeze, but the two fetuses in her stomach also froze. They all knew that as a demon, especially a high-level demon, the most harmful thing to do was to make them bleed dry. Because for a demon, blood meant the formation of a contract, and it also meant eternal submission. That was why every drop of a demon's blood was especially precious. It could bring people back from the dead, and it could also heal wounds quickly. But at the same time, a demon would bear the pain for the victim. Hellion Wei Wei's eyes stared blankly at the handsome face in front of her, which was always perfect and impeccable at any time. Did he mean to completely hand himself over to her in the future? When they made the contract, it was only from then on that her soul would belong to him. This was the most cunning part of a demon. Even if it was a life and death contract, the beneficiary would always be the demon. Not all demons were willing to submit to humans. But now he had added a new weight to the contract. Chapter 770. Why are you looking at me like that? Beligage's voice faded. His lips were pale, and he was about to retract his hand. Hellion Vivian's first reaction was to grab his hand. She tore her clothes and bandaged his hand. After she was done, she said softly, "Don't worry, I will be responsible for you for the rest of your life." The two little ones in her stomach were speechless. Weren't these lines supposed to be said by men? Why did mother say it so naturally? Awkward. On the contrary, Bailey Jiaju was very calm and unruffled. "This is what you said. My heart is more fragile, so you better do as you say, understand?" When Poison Spider heard this, he almost choked on his last gasp of air. A fragile heart. The weak heart is clearly here. On the contrary, Wei Wei earnestly nodded her head, appearing as if she had personally experienced what he said. The bigger fetus was angry. Father is really shameless. He even thought of a way to spill blood. But it can't be considered as a win. If he submits to humans, he will do whatever mother wants him to do. The real beneficiary is mother. The little fetus smiled. In the past, he had always felt that his father was very fickle, because he could see that his father was not looking forward to the birth of him and his older brother. He did not even look forward to the birth of his own flesh and blood. This was probably the common trait of all demons, especially his father who had lived for so long. But now, he suddenly understood that his father was not fickle. He had given the last bit of gentleness in his life to his mother. Otherwise, as a high-level demon, he would never submit to a human, especially a demon king, which was even more so. It seemed like brother didn't have to worry about a vixen seducing father anymore. In some ways, father was the one who was tied up. Beligaju obviously knew this, but he didn't seem to care. After the wound on Hellion Vivian's ankle healed, he immediately returned to his usual noble and cold self. He bent his slender waist slightly and said in a commanding tone, "Come on, I will carry you. It will be faster to walk." Hellion Vivian smiled and pounced on him. She rubbed her face against his back and asked comfortably, "I'm still curious whether the other baby is a boy or a girl." Beligaju fixed her long legs and said in a warning tone, "It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, as long as you don't come out like that little brat when you shouldn't. Aren't you a little too strict with the babies?" Hellion Vivian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Bailey Jiaju leisurely replied, "This highness is thinking of them, lest they end up with the same fate as that stupid spider." Hellion Vivian, "It would have been better if his highness hadn't mentioned spiders. But the moment he did, she couldn't help but look back. The spider was not completely dead yet, but it was on the verge of death. The shape of its stomach was slightly distorted by the stones. Originally, when Hellion Vivian was searching for the soul fragments, she didn't find that a certain highness had the habit of feeding the divine beast vegetables. Now that she saw the spider, she knew that what the Fire Qilin said before was true. It wasn't an exaggeration at all. Compared to letting people eat until they died, it was not an exaggeration to feed a carnivorous divine beast vegetables. Hellion Vivian fell into deep thought, as she felt the wind blowing past her ears. Even though Beligaju didn't tell her about the fetus, the smart Hellion Vivian still thought about it. She wasn't worried when she had one baby, but now she had two babies. One was a demon, and the other was a human. When normal twins were in the mother's womb, one would always steal the other's nutrients. This was the rule of survival. Moreover, now that it was a demon and a human, the situation would definitely be worse. There was no time. She had to reach the main coffin before the Ni family. The two people who were so focused on obtaining the Saraira didn't know that at this time, someone would accidentally step into this place. That person was Ni Biao. He originally thought that the journey to the main coffin would be smooth as long as he followed the spider's instructions. However, he didn't know why, but the deeper he went, the more he felt that someone was calling his name. When he finally reacted, he had already killed the people in his team. He didn't know where the rest of them went. It turned out that he had been separated from the rest of the team. However, Biao didn't understand why he was hallucinating. It was as if someone ordered him to kill those people. Was there a mistake? He was the best exorcist in the world. He was invulnerable to ghosts. Who could order him around? The conceited Biao had long forgotten that the reason he knew where the mechanism was because a demon told him. In the beginning, when Biao entered the spider's nest, he didn't have much of a reaction. However, when he saw the huge shadow in front of him, he was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He couldn't retreat or advance. The poisonous spider also recognized Biao. It gasped for breath and narrowed its eyes. "It's you?" Only then did Biao see its current state. He wasn't afraid anymore. He sneered at the poisonous spider. "Evil creature, die." Biao's spell was still effective against a dying demon. The light from the peachwood sword split into 3 and pierced the poisonous spider's body one by one. It was easy to see through Biao's plan. If he could bring back one of the black spider's limbs when he returned to the team, not only would the family regain their lost reputation, it would also increase his chances of winning the competition. Most importantly, his reputation among the exorcists would only continue to grow. The poisonous spider never thought that he would die in the hands of such a greedy villain. He didn't want to die at all. He tried his best to fight back. However, it was obvious that he had reached his limit. He only spat out a silver thread, which hurt Biao's flesh. Then he collapsed heavily behind him. Biao was in so much pain that his head hurt. The spider's silk was poisonous. Although it only grazed his arm, when blood flowed out, it was as if he was scalded. He snorted at the spider again. He raised the sword in his hand and chopped off one of its limbs. At this time, he coincidentally saw the exposed magical pill of the spider after its death. The voice in his mind started again. It sounded very familiar, but at that moment, Biao couldn't remember who it was. "Eat the magical pill, and you will become a more powerful exorcist." "No." Biao shook his head and retracted his hand. It was recorded in the Book of Exorcism that all exorcists are not allowed to consume magical pills. This is a forbidden spell. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.